Okay, I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are Trenton Magid, David Rosacker, Jeffrey Moore, Michael Pate, Patrick Morris, and I am Christine Carnes, Vice Chair. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Sherry Rockwell, Acting Assistant Planning Director, Eric England, Planning Manager, Mike Carter, Planning Board Administrator, Alan Thielen from the City Law Department, and Lisa Agins, Recording Secretary. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. Copies of today's agenda are located on the table in front of us. You are welcome to come down and pick one up. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases are perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, have already been heard, or been recommended for layover, and therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. This case will then be heard in the order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium, state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant, and after the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed, and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please clearly state your name, address, and whom you are representing for the record. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has been previously said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and please turn off your cell phones. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to the board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so that they are made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well as to the rest of the public. Rezoning matters are an exception to this rule. There are some changes to the consent agenda. Cases number 7 and 16 will be added to the consent agenda for layover. Okay, we will start with the consent agenda. Agenda item number 5, case C3-18-133. The applicant is Omnicorp Saddle Creek LLC. It's on consent for layover. The request is approval of an amendment to the future land use element of the city's master plan from low-density residential to office commercial and to change the boundary of the mixed-use area. This was laid over from our July 11th meeting. The location is 4405 Wakely Street. Would anyone like to have this item removed from the consent agenda? Okay. That will be removed. Mm-hmm. 9 and 15. Next item is agenda item number 7, case C8-18-051, C12-17-210. The applicant is Orchard Valley, Inc., care of Melvin Sudbeck. It's on consent for layover. The request is preliminary plat approval of Alloys Acres, a subdivision outside the city limits, with a waiver of section 5399, sidewalks, along with approval of a special use permit to allow development in the ED North Hills Environmental Resources Overlay District. This was laid over from our March 7th meeting. The location is southeast of 66th and Garvin Streets. Would anyone like to have this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 9, case C10-18-134, C12-18-135. The applicant is Omnicorp Saddle Creek LLC. This is on consent for layover. The request is preliminary and final plat approval of Poppleton Park Replat 3, a minor plat inside the city limits, with rezoning from R3 and GC to CC, along with approval of an MCC Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District. This was laid over from our July 11th meeting. The location is northeast of Saddle Creek Road and Davenport Street. Would anyone like to have this case removed from the consent agenda? Okay. The next case is agenda item number 10, C10-18-078, C12-18-079. Wish in One Hand Enterprises LLC is the applicant, and it's on consent for approval. The request is revised preliminary plat approval of Privada, a subdivision outside the city limits, with waivers of section 5382, curve radius, and section 5382B, cul-de-sac length, along with rezoning from AG to DR, R4, R6, R7, and MU, and final plat approval of Privada, lots 1 through 177, outlots A through Q, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR, R4, R6, R7, and MU. This was laid over from the October 3rd meeting. The location is southwest of 204th and West Center Road. Would anyone like to have this case removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Next item is agenda item number 13, case number C8-18-229. The applicant is Render Group LLC, DBA Comfort Care. It's on consent for approval. The request is approval of a special use permit to allow large group living in an R1 district. This was laid over from our October 3rd meeting. Location is 2315 South 168th Street. Would anyone like to have this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 15, case C14-18-138. The applicant is the planning board. It's on consent for layover. The request is vacation of the east-west alley west of 44th Street between Wakely and Davenport Streets, laid over from our July 11th meeting. Would anyone like to have this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 16, case C3-18-238. The applicant is the Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. It's on consent for layover. The request is approval of the Ashton Building TIF redevelopment project plan. The location is 1218 Nicholas Street. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 19, case C10-18-142, C12-18-143. The applicant is Mike Gawley. It's on consent for approval. The request is preliminary and final plat approval of Omaha View Replat 4, a minor plat inside the city limits with rezoning from R535 and R7 to R5. The location is southeast of 34th Avenue and Miami Street. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 21, case C3-18-254, C10-18-240, C12-18-241. The applicant's Lauren Johnson, Celebrity Homes Omaha. On consent for approval. The request is preliminary plat approval of Sagewood Ridge, a subdivision outside the city limits with a rezoning from AG to R4, along with a request for a variance to the present development zone boundary of the urban development element of the city's master plan. The location is northwest of 180th and 4th Streets. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, agenda item number 22, case number C10-18-242, C12-18-243. Applicant is Gretna Public Schools, Dr. Kevin Riley, Superintendent. It's on for approval. The request is preliminary plat approval of Falling Waters North, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R4. The location is south of HWS Cleveland Boulevard and west of 198th Street. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Yes. Okay. That will be removed. Agenda item number 23, case C10-18-247, C12-18-248, Blondo 180 LLC is the applicant, and it's on for layover. The request is preliminary plat approval of Blue Stem Meadows, a subdivision located outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR, R4, R6, and MU. The location is northwest of 180th and Blondo Streets. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Agenda item number 24, case C12-18-249. The applicant is Emily Meter. It's on for approval. The request is preliminary and final plat approval of Meter Meadows, replat 1, a minor plat outside the city limits. Property is located within the E.D. Lake Cunningham Environmental Overlay District and the North Hills Environmental Overlay District. The location is 7633 Dutch Hall Road. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 25, case C12-18-252. The applicant is Sweetbriar 4 LLC / Sweetbriar 2 LLC. On consent for approval, the request is preliminary and final plat approval of Sterling Ridge replat 5, a minor plat inside the city limits. Portion of the property is located in the Flood Fringe Overlay District and the Floodway Overlay District. The location is southeast of 132nd and Pacific Streets. Would anyone like to see this case removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 26, case C10-18-246. The applicant is Anderson Apartments, LLC. It's on for approval. The request is rezoning from DS to CBD. Property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district. The location is 2230 and 2236 Jones Street. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 27, case C10-18-255. The applicant is Sean Kelly. On consent for approval, the request is rezoning from GI to NBD. Property is located within an ACI 1 overlay district, and the location is 1903 South 13th Street. Would anyone like to see this case removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 28, case C11-18-257. Alley Pointer Macchiato Architecture is the applicant. It's on for approval. The request is approval of a PUR, Planned Unit Redevelopment Overlay District, and the location is southeast of 34th Avenue and Miami Street. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 30, case C14-18-253. The applicant is the Planning Board. It's on for approval, and the request is vacation of the east-west alley adjacent to lots 2 through 9, Hillcrest Addition, and the north-south alley adjacent to lot 6, Hillcrest Addition, and lot 2, Jones Street Addition, adjacent to 2210, 2230, and 2236 Jones Street, and 2235 St. Mary's Avenue. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none.
So I was informed that item number 22, it is not desired to pull that off consent. Alan, should we reread that and ask if anybody wants to pull it off again?
Alan Thielen from the Law Department. Just for clarity, I'd recommend just rereading it and giving everybody the opportunity again.
Okay. Agenda item number 22, case C10-18-242 and C12-18-243. The applicant is Gretna Public Schools, Dr. Kevin Riley, Superintendent, and it's on consent for approval. The request is preliminary plat approval of Falling Waters North, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR and R4. The location is south of HWS Cleveland Boulevard and west of 198th Street. Would anyone like to see this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none? Okay. Those are all the items on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I would move to lay over items 7, 15, and 16.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, can you please take the vote?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would,
motion approved.
I would move to approve agenda items 10, 13, 19, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 30.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, could you please take the vote?
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, if you are here for any of the cases on the consent agenda, those cases have now been disposed of unless they were removed from the consent agenda, so you are free to leave. The items that were removed from the consent agenda will be heard in their regular order. So you're free to go if your case has been disposed of. Although you're welcome to hang out with us if you'd like. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so we're going to start with the administrative meeting only. These items are administrative only, and there's no opportunity for public testimony on these cases. So agenda item number 1, case C10-18-128, C12-18-129. Lauren Johnson, Celebrity Homes, Omaha, is the applicant, and the request is final plat approval of Harrison 210 with a subdivision outside the city limits with a rezoning from AG and DR to R4. The location is northwest of Spence Drive and Harrison Street. May we hear from the city, please?
Sure. The preliminary plat of Harrison 210 was recommended for approval by the City Council on September 11, 2018. The applicant has addressed nearly all of the conditions of approval. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning from DR to R4 and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval, submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding this request to City Council in the 2 items listed in the recommendation report.
Thank you. We've heard from the city. Do we have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for the approval of rezoning from DR to R4 and the approval of the final plat, subject to conditions of preliminary plat approval, submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to this request to the City Council and addressing the 2 items in the staff report.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 2, case C12-16-052. The applicant is Lone Tree Holdings LLC. The request is final plat approval of the villas of Piney Creek, lots 52 through 111, outlots C through D, a subdivision outside the city limits, and the location is east of 204th Street and north of Blondo Parkway. May we please hear from the city?
Sure. The preliminary plat and Phase 1 final plat of the villas of Piney Creek was approved by City Council July 26, 2016. This is a second phase, which includes 60 single-family residential lots, 2 outlots within 12.18 acres of land. The site has existing R4 zoning, therefore there's no rezoning request with this final plat. Conditionally, the submitted final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat and ordinances at Chapter 53 of the Omaha Municipal Code. Staff recommends approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to City Council.
Thank you. We've heard from the city. Do we have any questions or discussion? Do I have a motion?
I motion for approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to the request to City Council.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 3, case C10-18-244, C12-18-245, Lauren Johnson, Celebrity Homes Omaha is the applicant. The request is final plat approval of Woodbrook, lots 1 through 105, and outlots A through C, formerly Sagewood Point, lots 149 through 260, and outlots E through G, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to R4. The location is southwest of 180th Street and Purple Martin Parkway. May we hear from the city, please?
Sure. So this request was, the preliminary plat was approved under the name Sagewood Point. This is the second phase, now called Woodbrook. It includes 105 single-family lots, 3 outlots for open space and drainage purposes within 34 acres. Staff recommends approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval relative to Phase 2 and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to City Council.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Do I have a motion?
Motion for the approval of the final plat, lots 1 through 105, outlots A through C, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval relative to Phase 2 and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 4, case C10-16-307, C12-14-083, Frank Krejci is the applicant, and the request is final plat approval of St. Pat's Field, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to DR. The property is located within a flood fringe and floodway overlay districts. The location is northeast of 230th Street and West Maple Road. May we hear from the city, please?
So this final plat, St. Pat's Field, is for one lot, about 9.5 acres in size, and would be utilized for multi-purpose recreational field, such as football and outdoor soccer for youth, boys, and girls, to be operated and maintained by St. Patrick's Catholic Church. The preliminary plat was approved by City Council in January of 2017. The applicant recently discovered that the final plat, which was laid over at Planning Board in 2016, had never come back through for that final approval. There is a separate special use permit to allow the outdoor sports and recreation for this site that was approved at Planning Board, but has not yet gone to City Council as well. So the special use permit, which is not on today's agenda, will accompany the final plat to City Council. Staff recommends approval. Approval of the rezoning from AG to DR. Approval of the final plat subject to the 3 conditions listed in the recommendation report prior to forwarding to City Council.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? May I have a motion?
Would move approval of the rezoning from AG to DR. The property is located within a flood fringe and floodway overlay district, and approval of the final plat subject to the 3 conditions outlined in the recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Can I take this one? Okay, we're going to take cases 5 and 9 together. Case 5 is C3-18-133. The applicant is Omnicorp Saddle Creek LLC, and the request is approval of an amendment to the future land use element of the city's master plan from low-density residential to office commercial, and to change the boundary of the mixed-use area. This was laid over from the July 11th meeting. The location is 4405 Wakely Street. And agenda item number 9 is case C10-18-134, C12-18-135. Omnicorp Saddle Creek LLC is the applicant. The request is preliminary and final plat approval of Poppleton Park Replat 3 a minor plat inside the city limits with rezoning from R3 and GC to CC, along with approval of an MCC major commercial corridor overlay district. This was laid over from our July 11th meeting. The location is northeast of Saddle Creek Road and Davenport Street. Can we hear from the applicants, please?
Afternoon, Jason Thielen, E&A Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road, Suite 100. On behalf of the applicant, we requested the layover to continue to work with staff on a variety of items that we've been working with staff on, as well as the neighborhood had a neighborhood meeting. And so I guess I would suggest we'd like to hear from whoever that was that pulled the item off, and then we'll take that into account and address that as we move forward with the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have after that.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Any opponents?
Hi, Margie Magnuson. I'm president of the Jocelyn Castle Neighborhood Association, where this property is at.
Could I get you to give your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 4151 Davenport.
Thank you.
I had sent a letter, or our association had sent a letter in July. Didn't appear at that hearing because I was told it was being laid over, so I was thinking we would have an opportunity to speak when it came back. So I'm sorry it got pulled off to consent, but we did meet with the applicant, and we did send a letter in July, and then again I sent you another letter. I've outlined some concerns there. Our neighborhood association was divided about this property, and so our neighborhood association had a neutral stance because we could not agree about this property. There's one, and I have outlined some of our concerns to you in our letter. One of the things I really came today mostly to stress, we've been trying to work with the city for a number of years. The traffic on Saddle Creek has gotten really crazy. With the Med Center, they've closed a lot of streets. They're trying to channel pretty much all the traffic down to Saddle Creek. It's becoming a major thoroughfare. We have problems in the neighborhood. If you're going down Davenport and you're sitting at that light at Saddle Creek, sometimes cars are backed up 4 or 5 deep because the light is, of course, longer there to let a lot of that traffic go on Saddle Creek. But wherever they're proposing to have the turn in off of Davenport into this to the strip mall, you could have backup on Saddle Creek because sometimes there's cars backed all the way up, and they'll probably block wherever that turn is. Same thing with Wakely. People were concerned about either going off onto Saddle Creek or coming up, heading east into the neighborhood, and the traffic went there. I don't know if this is possible, but the neighborhood would really like to see a traffic study request tied to, if you go ahead and approve this, we really need to have that looked at. On Saddle Creek, there should be a dedicated turn to turn off of Saddle Creek onto Davenport. Right now, again, it's a backup if you want to turn because there is so much traffic. So I really would like to see if it's possible to get a traffic study tied to that and have that done as they go to start to develop that. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Would you like to comment? Okay. May we hear from the city? Sure.
I'd call Public Works up to address the traffic.
Ryan Haas with the Public Works Department. We had been forwarded a request, I don't know if it came from this particular group or from another interested party, but we had received the request to require a traffic study in conjunction with this project. Based on our evaluation, we know Wakely is never going to be signalized. We know Davenport is already signalized. We have the turn lanes that are feasible on Saddle Creek to handle the north and southbound left turns at the traffic signal at Davenport. We would certainly agree that it's concerning the placement of the access to the proposed site along Davenport. We don't want to have the queues at the signal block that access, so then someone turning east onto Davenport and desiring to turn into the site would not have that opportunity. And so we certainly would echo that as a concern, but that's more of an issue of the placement of the driveway, not anything that would necessarily be evaluated as part of a traffic study. Other than that, we have good connectivity to the neighborhood and over to 44th Street, 42nd Street. There's a good network of local streets to kind of serve the distribution of traffic. So we don't feel that a traffic study would be merited here because wouldn't be really anything to assess as far as necessary infrastructure. We would just continue to work with the applicant on the placement of their driveway on Davenport Street.
May we hear from the city on agenda item number 5, please?
Okay. I'm not going to get a whole bunch into the recommendation report. We definitely support meeting with the applicant to have further discussions on the project. And specifically to case agenda item number 5, we're in support of a layover.
We'll go ahead and vote on agenda item number 5. Do we have any questions or discussion first? Do we have a motion?
Motion for layover.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
May we hear from the city on agenda item number 9?
Sure.
please?
Specific to agenda item number 9, which is the plat and rezoning, the department is also supportive of the layover.
Any questions or discussion?
Move
we
to
have-
layover.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 6. We will also take this with agenda item number 11. Number 6 is case number C3-18-234. The applicant is Bucks, Inc., doing business as Buchanan Energy. The request is approval of an amendment to the future land use element of the city's master plan from low-density residential to office commercial and to change the boundary of the mixed-use area laid over from the October 3rd meeting. The location is 106 South 50th Street. Agenda item number 11 is case C10-18-221. The applicant is Bucks, Inc., doing business as Buchanan Energy, and the request is rezoning from R3 and GC to GC and approval of an expansion to the ACI 2 overlay district. Portion of the property is in an ACI 2 overlay district. This was laid over from the October 3rd meeting as well. The location is 5003 Dodge Street and 106 South 50th Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon, Ryan Glenn of Hush Blackwell, 13330 California Street, Suite 200, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm here today to represent the applicant, obviously, Bucks, Inc., with respect to their request for rezoning. As we previously discussed with you, we had a request to layover to today to give us an opportunity to not only kind of fine-tune a proposed development agreement, but also to meet with the neighborhood in the Dundee neighborhood in order to see if we could perhaps alleviate some of the concerns that were previously addressed at the prior meeting. Madam Chair, can I please approach to give a couple of exhibits? So at the last meeting, it was discussed that there was some sense of distrust of the applicant, Bucks, Inc., with respect to, is this request for rezoning simply a stepping stone in order to further expand the existing Bucks service station at the 50th and Dodge location? The proposed development agreement that was submitted last month has been fine-tuned slightly, and that is before you today. What that development agreement does, in our opinion, is that helps to rebuild the trust among the neighborhood and lessens any potential negative impact that the rezoning to GC could potentially have on this neighborhood setting. What it does is that it ties Buck's hands in perpetuity, as this will be a deed restriction on both parcels because it will be recorded against both parcels, so that Bucks will not be allowed to expand the existing footprint of the current service station. The proposed development plan that is referenced in the document before you is solely to do the refacing of the existing structure. And what this will do will actually further the master plan, because part of the master plan indicates that what you folks desire and what the city desires is that historical neighborhoods are maintained, such as the Dundee neighborhood. And so what this does is that this was taken in order to remodel after a 1919 service station feel. It will be a dramatic improvement, as I am sure you know, to the existing appearance of the service station. And so that is the entirety of the proposed development of the property, and that agreement before you will accomplish that goal in the future for the neighborhood. We also did have an opportunity earlier this week to speak with the Dundee Memorial Park Association Board, which, as you know, in the letter before you, represents approximately 3,000 residents in the nearby neighborhood. After hearing what Bucks intended to do with the property and what Bucks intended not to do with the property, the neighborhood association decided to vote, and the board did agree to support our position for rezoning. And so with respect to that, I think that their position does speak great miles towards our goal here, because the master plan, of course, is a living document and can be amended. And if the neighborhood of Dundee is not concerned with the potential commercialization encroachment into their residential neighborhood, with the restriction, of course, of the development agreement being executed between the city and Bucks representatives, then the master plan is not being negatively, I guess, impacted for precedential purposes, which I know is a concern of a couple of you by virtue of last meeting as well as the pre-meeting before this afternoon. As I mentioned before, the development agreement will actually further another important element of the master plan, which is to preserve and protect unique historical features with the proposed development plan that is before you. It is preserving and protecting the existing historical feel of the Dundee neighborhood. With respect to other potential encroachment, I just want to briefly speak to that. So I know one of the concerns with the city is that this is against what the master plan said, and that the expansion of the mixed-use overlay district is contrary to the master plan. This is the current property, of course, that we are seeking rezoning of. As you can see along the Dodge Street corridor, there are several instances of office commercial space, and merely 2 blocks over is a further encroachment into the residential neighborhood. And I believe this is the current commercial development that is directly across the street from the CVS pharmacy. And so it's obvious that the master plan was meant to be a living document and can be analyzed on a case-by-case individual basis. This was a mistake to lay the concrete before having the permit. Mr. Buchanan admitted that at the last meeting and is sorry for it. However, this is putting the neighborhood in a better position than it currently sits now, because that neighborhood will have the benefit of the development plan to know that in the future, no further expansion can occur on that lot. As I believe some of you have mentioned before, there will never be a residential home that is back on this vacant lot now. And so to add the benefit of additional green space that was referenced in our site plan and before you today as well, with the benefit of the additional green space and the refacing of the existing structure, we think that we're leaving the corner of 50th and Dodge in a better position than it sits today. And I do have Mr. Buchanan here as well to offer a brief comment.
Thank you.
Hi,
Any-
Steve Buchanan.
Go ahead.
5001 Dodge Street,
Thank you.
Omaha. Any questions, or I want to thank you for listening and hopefully that you can support this rezoning application, and any questions you might have, I'm here to help.
How long would the remodeling take if you change it back to the retro?
We've been working with the city currently for 6 months on the exterior because it's in an overlay zone. There are certain materials required, so we're currently working with the city now for hopefully we can get this done in the next 9 months completed.
And what is it that your remodel would actually entail?
Well, a complete facelift of the exterior. We can't do any more than that because the overlay doesn't allow us to expand or whatever. So it'll look like a 1920s standard gas station that would have been around in the 20s.
And will you only do that if this amendment is approved, or is that something you would do even if?
Well, I don't want to say that it's one or the other because I don't think that's fair. This is part of a master plan of mine to make that corner look better. And when we have the new fence in the back that we've provided to do new shrubbery and trees, then you have a very aesthetic looking gas station. It needs to be overhauled. It's been 50 years, so.
Steve, how many people were there or was it Monday night, or when you met with the with Dundee?
It was their whole.
Was it their HOA meeting? Okay.
Yeah, their monthly meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Yep.
thanks.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yep. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Are there any proponents?
I'm Peter Manhart. 312 South 57th Street, and I'm the president of the Dundee Memorial Park Association, and I'm here on behalf of the board. We met with Steve and his folks Monday evening, and we spent a good 45 minutes to an hour, and most of us knew all of the details of this, and we just wanted more information from them. I don't think this is a regular case of what the city describes as a rezoning. How many of you have worked in the same gas station since you were 19 years old? We live in Dundee. I don't know if you know about Dundee. I can go take on the world, strike it rich, and the only place I want to move back to is Dundee. So there's not many neighborhoods that you can talk about in the country that the richest man in the world never left. So, and Steve, I would say, and I didn't really want to talk all that much about Steve, but when I was sitting back there, I thought, you know, this is really all about Steve. What we wanted as a board is Steve to really just give us his word. I mean, you guys obviously have a say in this, but we wanted him to give us his word that of all the Buckies, and you've seen his life work all over town, he loves this one the most. So there's no question about that in my mind. He loves the neighborhood, and he'll do the right thing, and we're confident of that, and we talked about that. So I just wanted to kind of illustrate to you that this, to us as a neighborhood group, we deal with this a lot with different investors that come in and say, this is an amazing neighborhood, I want to take advantage. We don't see that as this. We see it as, let's move forward. We understand that he made mistakes, but we would certainly not want this to go back to a vacant lot. The agreement looks agreeable to us, and I think that's about it. Any questions?
How concerned are you about commercial creep into residential lots? Do you see this as a precedent that's going to fester, or do you see this as like a one-time?
Well, we're very concerned when people come in from outside the neighborhood that don't have 40 years of experience in the neighborhood. We're very concerned about those people because we understand that those people are doing it for other reasons than what Steve's doing. And Steve's really just, if you've been to the location, he's really just trying to make it easier for you to get into his car wash. Not to mention, we want that buffer from residential to, but I mean, I'm 46. Chris's drugstore is not Charleston, South Carolina building. I mean, we're not talking about beautiful, amazing buildings. This is a much better neighborhood than we grew up in, and Steve's one of the ones that helped with that. So I would say of course we're concerned as a board, but we'll always be around. That's what we basically
Do you see any
said.
concerns, though, that this lot doesn't have a house on it and it's going to have a driveway on it?
Well, if you go by and you look at it, if somebody said there was a house there, you would not even know.
It's a small lot.
It's a small lot. I mean,
And it sits above the other one.
all Dundee lots are pretty small, but it's a small lot, and our biggest concern was just seeing the landscaping so that we can see a clear kind of transition onto the block. And really, I think a lot of the neighbors, it came down to, yeah, you don't like this, but what do you want to do now? He's not going to put a house up there and sell it to somebody. The options here are either improve the lot to the best, and I think Steve will do that. He's already done a lot of it. And then let's move forward. I mean, that's kind of how we felt about it. We've dealt with a lot of other issues similar to this, where the owner was not near as agreeable and we had no track record with. So this was encouraging that we had a track record with him.
How important is the remodel as part of this, that to have him sign saying that he'll do the retro and lock down the square footage of the footprint and all that kind of stuff? Is that important
Well,
to the
locking
neighborhood?
down the footprint is important to us, but as far as aesthetically, I mean, it's his business. We all want it to. We've dealt with this with CVS Pharmacy. We've dealt with this with other. Of course, we want it to fit the neighborhood, but we also understand that people make business decisions, and we just do our best to encourage them that if it does fit with the neighborhood, it'll last longer in the neighborhood. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city, please?
Sure. So as we discussed last month, this request is to expand office commercial, both the actual zoning and on the future land use map. While we appreciate the applicant working with neighbors, talking, through discussions, a potential development agreement, well, that's all well and good, but the city views this as a blatant disregard of the master plan. When that driveway was put in for commercial purposes without benefit of permit, and, we went over that last month, and they were upfront and honest and apologetic, but the city, we don't view that as justification for expansion of the office commercial. If that driveway hadn't been put in and there was a residential house there, would it be viewed differently? We believe that expansion of the office commercial zoning and changing the master plan would be a further encroachment into an established neighborhood. If you allow it here, we believe it does set precedent for other areas and locations around our jurisdiction. And, if you let this property do it, what about one block to the west? Maybe they want to encroach little bit further down to the south, into the neighborhood, tear down a couple houses, do the same thing. I can't specifically speak to the 49th Street that the applicant's representative used as an example of, having the office commercial further to the south. Maybe that's been there 50, 60 years, I don't know. It is a little bit different scenario with that abutting street on the south boundary. There is a little bit of a buffer in that example, but I can't specifically speak. Yes, there's not a clear straight line throughout the jurisdiction that only goes a certain distance. That's definitely not the case in how our city developed. I guess specifically to the proposed development agreement, we had seen a previous version. Our law department had looked at it, and there was tweaks, modifications, and suggestions that they would recommend if the city was willing to enter into a development agreement, which at this time we are not. I can't speak for what was presented to the board today. We haven't had a chance to review that. But ultimately, development agreement or not, the city believes that the master plan should not be amended. So for specifically agenda item number 6, staff recommends denial.
Any questions or discussion?
Yeah, and I said this in the pre-meeting this morning, that this board exists to discuss things like this, and although we have a master plan for a reason, and we have zoning and barriers and things like that, but I think our board exists for reasons like this. That's a very unique situation. I don't think it sets precedent. I think every case has to be handled individually, number one. Number two, you've got the greater area in the neighborhood that depends on this for services. They get their cars fixed there, they get their gas, they get their car washed, and the only people that are probably against the expansion is if they own a collision repair services like Dingman's or something, because they want to get the fenders bent up by the sharp turn if we get rid of that driveway. This is a very unique neighborhood, and I understand the department's concern, but I think that everything considered, I think the retro feel and taking an old 50-year-old gas station and making it look like it fits in the neighborhood and it's shiny and brand new, and there's no question that the Bucks Inc. or Buchanan's Bucky's gas stations, they spend a lot of money on their stations, and that's why a lot of us go there, and it's preferred. And when I drive by on Dodge Street, I'd much rather see an updated version of this. I don't see behind it. I think the neighborhood is screened already from the fences there. It sits a few feet above the residential next to it. And so I know this is a hard case for a lot of people, but I think that this is a case where you give the people what they want, and the neighborhood depends on this site, and he is a good neighbor, and it's going to be a lot better. Now, this isn't the final say. No matter what we decide here, the applicant can decide whether to go to city council. If we deny it, it makes it harder at city council because he needs 5 votes instead of 7 votes at city council. But I remain supportive of their efforts, all things considered, assuming that a development agreement gets signed where he's restricted as discussed, and let's see if it goes.
If I could just make one point. If the case were to be denied, the applicant can still run his business that's been run for decades. So we're not saying to shut down the business. We're saying to remove the driveway and to not rezone the residential lot to commercial. So I just want to point that out.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion? This is agenda item number 6.
Move to deny.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please call the vote?
Morris?
Yes.
Magid?
No.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, request denied.
Okay, on agenda item number 11, the department's recommendation, please.
Department recommends denial.
Any comments or questions?
Move to deny. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please call the vote?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Magid?
No.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Request denied.
Okay, agenda item number 8. Case C10-99-044, C12-18-130, Dragon Storage LLC. Request is a preliminary plat approval of Waterford Crossing replat 27, a subdivision outside the city limits, along with approval of a major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement for Waterford Crossing. This was laid over from the July 11th meeting. The location is northeast of 156th and Ida Streets. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman. Brent Beller, 114 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the project applicant, Dragon Storage LLC. With me today is Mike Welniak and Brian Ritter of the development team, along with Randy Cusack of Lamper Nearson, the project engineer. So we were before you all in July with this particular project. Part of that layover was to work on our site design, continued outreach with the neighborhood just to the west of us. And so now, after discussing with the city, doing some neighborhood meetings, which I'll get into, we're back. So just to give everyone a little bit of a reminder on what this particular project is. So this is 156th looking north, going west. This is Ida Street. This is the Waterford Crossing residential subdivision to the south. Burlington Capital is doing some apartments down here, and to the west, this is going to be a future public school. So this particular site is part of a mixed-use development area. So as we all know, mixed-use development, subject to a mixed-use development agreement. As it sits today, well, just a little bit before I get into that, actually, the site characteristics on this particular site, and we talked about this at the July meeting, is the grade. And that's important in this particular project because of where these residential lots to the east of us sit. So these are all basically townhomes, duplex type lots on this east side. All of these homes sit higher in grade versus our project site. And as you move down, this is actually a drainage area. So these, on our property line, down to this property line, it's probably a 30 to 40 foot elevation change. And that's important when we get into what we're actually proposing here in terms of these folks' sight line, because I know in talking with a lot of the neighbors, they have concerns about what they're looking at, and we want to be mindful of that in our design and what we're proposing in front of you today. So as we sit today, if nothing changed in the world, this is the existing mixed-use development site plan. So before you today, we're doing two things. We're getting our preliminary plat approved, and then we're also amending the mixed-use development agreement and this particular site plan to allow for what we're proposing to do. But I do want to point out some material issues or material components of the existing plan as it sits today. So anybody today could come in and they could build this project. This, when it was laid out in 2005, has a heavy amount of retail office components. So as you can see, there's a number of different buildings in here, pretty intense use, a lot of traffic that would have been involved in this particular project. Our use, the main use is obviously storage, which is a very light intense use in terms of traffic counts in and out. The other important thing about this particular site plan are the entrances. So off of Ida Street, this plan calls for, this is the 8th mile entrance. So currently, this will be a full access movement here. Once Ida is improved by the city, we have a right in, right out. But what's important about this particular access point is we do not control that. This is city required. The location of it is the 8th mile, so it's a proximity to these lots we have no control over. Number two, the length of this drive and how it's paralleled with these lots on the east side, again, we have no control over that. That's governed by the city road standards. So this is here, it's going to remain. It was a part of the original plan. We're not changing that. The same is true as we go up north to the Iowa Street roundabout. So this is a roundabout which will tie into. Location is dictated both by this plan and city standards. The other important feature of this particular plan is there was always contemplated a drive along the eastern property boundary of our site. So this, you could either go back here, and this area, I presume, is for both pedestrian access vehicles, but also delivery vehicles, trash containers, anything, and deliveries in the mornings, traffic, dumpster trucks moving in and out. So one of the things that we talked with the neighborhood about is, think about the fact that 6 a.m., 5:30 a.m. deliveries, traffic, not to mention the dumpsters that would be located back here in the middle of summer. There could be issues there. But the reality is this drive and this sort of vehicular access back here was always here, and it's important because we too are going to have some vehicle movement on there with 154th Street there. So that's what's there today. So whoever was to develop this property, they can either do this, or they can do what we're proposing today, which is amend this site plan to allow for a different use. The reality is, and we talked about this extensively when we met in July, was this property has sat here since 2005. If anybody wanted to do retail development or commercial development of this nature, they would have done it by now. And that's just the reality of the market that we live in 2018. I'm not a broker, don't pretend to be one, but the reality is retail right now is hard to do. So what you're seeing here is an opportunity to redo this, change some of the retail components, bring in a new use that may actually spur development, and I'll get into that in a minute when I talk about our plan, but that's effectively what we're proposing today. So when we met in July, we presented this plan. So a few changes to this plan. Number one thing that's not changing is still storage. One of the things that we changed based on our conversations with the neighborhood was there's a landscaping buffer that currently is not there with this office building that we would have had. We've now relocated that office building back onto our site. In addition, there are concerns about 154th Avenue, its location to the neighbors to the east. We took their insight. We made some modifications to our plan with some concessions from the city on some setbacks, and so we were able to alleviate that concern. And then we also eliminated these two buildings. And part of that elimination was there is a 10-foot setback requirement that you have to have between storage and commercial. And just based on the site constraints and moving 154th Avenue farther to the west, it just didn't make it feasible for what we needed to do. So attached is the newest site plan or preliminary plat that we're proposing today. So some of the biggest changes, as I said, this area up here is basically an outlot, a community area that we will continue to allow for community area use. Obviously, this property, should be noted, all of our site is within the SID. So we know today we will do this project. We are committed to building these storage units. Why is that important? Well, that's important because the residents that all live in this SID will benefit, in some senses, conceivably, when this property tax basis comes on from the commercial development. In addition, some of the public improvements, the sanitary sewer, the utilities that tie into these commercial lots up on the south side, we will install those, so these will now be pad-ready sites that someone could come in if they want to do retail. It's important to note, we're not proposing to do these developments. Dragon Storage, they are storage developers. So it is our hope that when we do this development, we install these public improvements, that will bring on the ability for these commercial lots and these retail lots to perhaps get developed. But again, storage, office, retail, more office on the frontage on Ida Street. One of the things that we did, and one of the things that some of the neighbors to the east of us were very mindful was the location on 154th Avenue. The reality of that location is we are subject, as I stated before, this entrance can't move. This is the 8th mile. We can't change the connection and how long this drive must extend out going north. So in our neighborhood meetings, we spoke with a lot of the owners that lived here, and their concern was the location of this right-of-way with their lots. But the reality is we can't do anything about that. The one thing we did do is there used to be a 35-foot setback between the storage unit and the right-of-way. In discussing with the city and presenting this plan, we were allowed, and to the city's concession, to make this actually a 20-foot setback, 25-foot setback, which basically allowed us to move 154th Avenue further away from those lots. So in telling you that, again, I think it can be commended on the developer. They listened to the neighborhood concerns. We tried to do as much as we could do to make this use and this road up here a little bit more palpable for the residents. So the last point in all of this is site. A lot of the neighbors are concerned about what they're staring at, that sort of thing. And so what we did is we did prepare, and we showed this at the last meeting as well, basically a cross-section of what folks will be looking at. So in this particular drawing, I don't know if we can zoom in maybe just a little bit. This is the homes on the east side. As they look out, we will have extensive landscaping. All of our landscaping, all of our sidewalks, our roadways, those are all to city standards. We comply with everything the urban design guideline requires for landscaping in here. Admittedly, when it's first developed, it's going to be newer trees, but the reality is over time these trees grow, and so that will be factored into all of this. But as these folks look out, they're currently looking out, and they'll see the trees. The tops of our building are about 10 feet. So currently, you could have a building be 40 feet high. So if at 40 feet, you could have buildings sitting up here. Now, that's what could be allowed as the plan sits today. Obviously, what we're proposing is single-story storage units on the majority of these lots. So therefore, site views, why we get it, folks don't necessarily love staring at this. It's a bit negated by the fact that they sit lower in the elevation change. The only caveat is this particular building. It's actually a 2-story, but the only reason it's 2 stories is because that grade drops, so we stack units on top of there. So that was, again, another big concern from neighbors. So we had a neighborhood meeting back in June. We then worked with the city, then we had planning board, and then we worked with the city with redesigning our plans. Once we had those plans vetted with the city, we actually had a meeting on October 10th. About 7 to 10 residents showed up to that meeting. And then we actually had a second meeting just to make sure that if folks couldn't make the October 10th meeting, we had one on October 23rd, and we had one resident show up. So in addition to that, Mr. Welniak had met with individually had discussed with some residents about the project, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but those conversations were positive in the sense that they appreciated some of the changes that had been effectuated by this updated plan. So make sure I covered all my bases here. So with that, obviously here for any questions. If there's any comments or neighborhoods, we're happy to reply, and of course we appreciate the board's consideration.
You said this whole project is part of the SID of the residential? It's all one
Yeah.
SID?
Yes.
And the SID's been around for, do you know how long the SID's?
At least 2004.
Okay, so in your opinion, from your experience, would developing this in the next year or so decrease the debt ratio and increase the valuation of the taxable?
That's right. So one of the things that can't be lost on the neighbors and actually benefit to them is this commercial development brings an increase in property value. So those property taxes get paid to the SID. So conceivably with the increase in value, maybe they get a decrease in their levy, how much they're paying in taxes. And the other thing to keep in mind is all these public improvements, these get installed via this property, which makes these lots on Ida Street, more marketable, easier to market because they're going to be all stubbed in. So they're basically pad ready. Again, we're not proposing to do this development. We're not office retail guys, but somebody will. And by having this be the impetus behind getting this thing going, I mean, they're going to see an increase in the property taxes. The property taxes that are generated off of this project will go to help perhaps the levy that some of these folks in the residential subdivision are paying.
So I want to make sure I understand this development here. So you're saying those two the office buildings to the south
Mhm.
are not part of this development with the storage units? Or
S-
is the land going to be owned by the developers?
Yes, so as part of, when we're amending the mixed-use development agreement, like the folks who did this plan, you have to provide a conceptual drawing. Now, somebody could come in and say, well, we want to change the lot configuration. If they do that, they're going to be standing where I am today, asking for you all to amend the site plan, this site plan, to allow for a different use. But the reality is conceptually, this is what we're proposing. Somebody could come in, they could build these the exact way they are today, or the way we're proposing, or they could do something else. And again, they'll go through the same process that we're going to amend that site plan.
But Mr. Welniak and Ritter own that property, or will
That's
own
right.
that property?
That's right.
Is that correct? Okay.
They'll
So
own it
nothing
and-
could happen to that property as well?
That's right. I mean, based on our conversations, they don't want to sit on this. They want to get this sold, and by doing this and getting these public improvements, again, it makes that site a lot more marketable to sell.
Okay, how many acres total in that site?
I think it's 10.10.
So roughly 9 to 10 acres?
Yeah.
What about that other piece on the other side of the drainage?
So this is existing. So currently, right now, Casey's, there's a C-store right here.
Okay.
They're open.
They're still open.
This fast food unit is not there. This is conceptual, but this is a good example, Mr. Pafer, to answer your question. This was in the initial plan. Somebody's doing this. So somebody built that C-store. Somebody may come in and change this fast food lot if they want to, but the reality is this C-store, this is there now. This is not there, and obviously this remains undeveloped.
Okay, and what will the as-completed tax valuation be of the storage units, just the storage units?
I would be speculating at what that valuation might be.
Have you had an appraisal?
I don't know if we have it. Well, if we go off of our total costs, so our total costs are about 7.7 million for this. So if you use the percentage of construction costs, if you go 95%, you're looking at 7.3 million-ish on valuation that potentially could benefit the SID.
And there is a counter argument too, that if there were office buildings or other uses of this other than storage units, the valuations might be higher than $7.7 million.
Arguably.
So in this new design, from the one that we looked at a couple months ago, it looks like you're adding storage units too to the original plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How many more additional storage units are you adding?
So, yeah, that's right. So we didn't add any other units. Really, what we did is because we pushed that 154th Street south, we basically shifted all of our buildings south, and we actually changed some of the turning radiuses in here, and then that allowed us also to put that commercial, that office building here, and also push to the south.
Those units that are on the southern border there, though, those weren't in the design that we looked at a couple months ago.
That's right, 'cause
You had
we-
office buildings in there.
That's right. So the prior plan. So here was the prior plan, you're right. So here's the two office buildings we had here. This building was not on our site, or not on the storage site. By moving this over here, we did have to change layouts. So some of these double stacked right here get pushed a little bit farther south, which allows us to put them over here on the south side.
And you're saying there's no net new additional storage units to that plan?
You can go on.
Are you asking about square footage or number of
No,
units?
number of units.
Mike Welniak, S number with Dragon Storage, 15803 Pacific Street. On the existing plan, these two buildings here were a two-story building. Up above was retail, down below was storage. So these, if you understand it or not.
That made up the grade. That was so you could have 2 stories both at grade, right?
Yes, because we're sinking this whole entire lot.
So you were planning to build then an office building / storage unit
Yes.
as part of this development.
Correct.
But yet you said that you're not office developers.
Well, that wasn't our first go-around with this thing here as we started looking at this and then started looking at what we do best and what we don't do. We decided that we're not adding any more storage units. Actually, we lose some storage units. In the original one, I'm sorry, this first building here was retail up above, storage down below, temperature-controlled storage. This guy here was temperature-controlled storage up above and down below.
Okay.
Okay?
So that was one of my other questions is, with the redesign,
Yes.
none of your storage units are going to be climate controlled.
Yes, there will be.
There will be. Okay. Which ones?
Those will be, here you go. Oh, I'm sorry. This guy right here will be climate controlled on top and climate controlled on the bottom. We still need to have some type of climate control for people that want to store their valuables.
And so all the other units are going to be outdoor garage type
Yes.
storage units.
is
Is that correct? Okay. You'd indicated, and I think you indicated that in 2005, is when this whole development kind of started, 2004, 2005. And you think that this parcel, if it were really meant to be retail or office or combination of both, would have developed by now? Because of its location, I assume, is maybe why you're making that comment.
Yeah, I mean, that's my input based on the fact that anyone could have done this for the last 14 years, and
Sure.
nobody did.
There are several examples around the city of really, really good corners that you thought would have developed into something by now that haven't developed into anything.
That's right.
So I don't know that anybody can make that assumption that it would have developed by now into something other than what you're proposing to do here, because there's several examples around the city of those very good corners.
And I'm just stating that the reality of where we sit today is if somebody could have penciled this project out, they would have. And here you have a project that pencils out. It happens to be a use that's a bit different than what was in the mixed-use development agreement, but it's still bringing an increase in value. It's still going to spur some commercial and office use on IDA. It's an otherwise permitted use under this zoning designation anyway. So, you know, that's just me saying the reality of things.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I don't happen to agree with that. I think there's a better use for this site, to be honest with you. Noble idea, noble cause. Neighborhoods want services, right? Neighborhoods want essential services for convenience purposes,
Sure.
right? And one of them might be storage units, but I think there are other types of uses that are better suited for this site than storage units would be. That's why I'm asking all these questions, is because from a tax valuation, yeah, it would immediately impact the taxable base out there right now. But, and I'm not a gambler, so I wouldn't bet on something else developing later on that would increase the valuation. But the likelihood of that, as that area continues to develop and expand, is probably going to happen. How long it takes, I don't know. So I think the valuation could be a lot higher, tax base could be a lot higher with the right types of property and development in there. I don't think storage units is it.
With all these, it could be zero though too,
Could
for
be.
years.
Absolutely could be. That's why I say I'm not a gambler.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
a gambler.
and the other thing is, I mean, we talked to neighbors about the fact that you could put a Walmart here, you could put a neighborhood market. You know, would you like to sit and stare at a 40-foot Walmart? And folks said, no, we don't. So there's a fine balance, and look, we get it, we understand it, but there's a fine balance to what do you want to stare at. The reality is, it's a mixed-use center. This is allowed.
It could be a healthcare facility.
It
be
could.
a senior living facility. I mean, it could all sorts of uses.
Mike, I understand what you're saying, and I've been in commercial real estate development for 25 years, and we all know, and you're an associated business, and, you know, this could take 10 more years, it could take 15 more years, and it's not to say that you put the wrong product there at any time, but at the same time, the one thing about storage units, and I know a lot of neighbors have concern about their kids and walking to school and everything, and once we have our discussion, I want Ryan to come up and actually address the question of how much traffic there'd be for something like this versus what the development agreement currently says if you had office and retail and you had high density, all that kind of stuff, to me, there'd be a hell of a lot more traffic and more concern for children and stuff like that. Yes, you get some other services that you'd like, but I want it all out there and see, what the impact will be. But I think that the concern would be, and given the state of, as you mentioned too, the state of retail right now, it's slower. You're not, retail is just, even on smaller space, I wouldn't want to see a big retail development in here right now and have it sit empty for 10 years also. And so it comes back to demand and use. Every neighborhood wants to have the Whole Foods next door and all that kind of stuff, but the truth is Whole Foods not coming here. And again, we've seen enough shopping centers sit vacant for a while, and that's worse than not building at all.
So would you say generally then, Trenton, in your professional opinion, that a corner like this, all around the city, shouldn't be developed commercially then?
No, I'm not saying that at
Well,
all.
I mean, that's kind of the premise you're talking about, because there is still a demand for services in the city.
There's plenty more corners that can be developed as well.
Sure, that's what I said.
Let's continue the public hearing if we could.
Yeah. That's all the questions I have for you right now. Thanks.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Okay.
Do we have any other proponents? Any opponents who wish to speak?
Hi, I am Jeremy Halliburton. I live at 15206 Vane Street in Waterford, and I am also a SID board member for 441 in the neighborhood. There's a few points I want to make about this. I'm not outright opposed to having a storage facility in the neighborhood. I am, however, opposed to the type of storage facility that they're proposing putting in the neighborhood. I feel like when you look at a lot of the other successful storage facilities that they've built in the city, I know someone at one point in time had pointed out the Dino storage on 144th Maple. I think they've also built several others like 72nd and Maple as well, where it is an enclosed commercial-looking structure as opposed to an outdoor structure. With an outdoor storage facility essentially in the middle of a neighborhood, I feel like it's going to have too much of an industrial feel to it, looking at rows of garage doors. And no matter how much lipstick you put on that pig, it's still going to be a pig. You're going to have, like I said, an industrial looking feel essentially in the middle of the neighborhood. I know at one point they had mentioned the size of the lot, and again, comparing to some of the other storage facilities like the Dinos. If you look at a lot of those, they kind of range in the range of like 2 to 3 acres. According at least to the GIS for this particular lot, you're talking almost 7 acres of storage, again, in the middle of a neighborhood. I'm not saying that I would be opposed to modifying it, shrinking it down, changing it to an indoor similar to a Dino's type facility, but as is, like I said, I really don't feel like it fits in with the style of the neighborhood. They had mentioned that the growth, or that if there was going to be a build out of this area, it would have happened by now. And I feel like that's kind of a disingenuous argument to say that, well, someone should have done it, so it's obviously not going to ever happen, kind of like you had already said. The neighborhood has just recently started taking off. You do have that apartment complex that's going to be going on the south side. All the other recent growth in northwest Omaha, and particularly the neighborhood itself, we're getting pretty close to actually filling up the SID as well. There's not very many vacant lots left that, the rooftops themselves would have justified having the retail like it might now. If you compare something like the Casey's that just opened within the last month or so, I am astounded at how busy that facility is. I mean, you'll have people parking down the side of the street, pouring out of the parking lot, parking in the neighborhood. People are walking from the neighborhood to get to it. So the traffic already with just that one development has increased significantly. And if you have that much more traffic coming into the area with the apartments, the high school in the next 2 to 3 years, I really think that there is a much better use for a lot like this than something like a storage unit. I know like he had said, there's the possibility of putting a neighborhood market or something like that. And I don't think people are necessarily opposed to having something there. They know that something was going to be there. It was just the type of facility that they're going to have to look at and look down at. No matter how you slice it, if you're going to sit on your back deck and look down at a row of garage doors, it's going to be unappealing as opposed to some of the other alternatives that you could have. The neighborhood meeting that they had mentioned, I really don't feel like they reached out to the neighborhood as much as they could have. Like I said, being on the SID board, I knew that there was development going in, but they never extended an invitation beyond, I believe, the minimum range that's necessary by the code to make an amendment. I never received anything saying that, hey, there's a meeting, a neighborhood meeting, please come and attend, we'd like your input or anything like that. And most other people weren't. I think it was just the few people that were nearby that actually got those notices, and hence the low turnout at a lot of those. As far as the tax valuation goes, being able to speak from the SID board and knowing our budget, as impactful as it might be to have development there, we're already on track to lower our levy. We're doing fine financially now, now that the neighborhood has started to fill out more, and also with items like the Casey's that have been constructed there. So I would rather hold out for a quality development as opposed to just throwing something there and saying that, well, it's a tax base, so you should be happy that you're getting more taxable structures. Kind of also along those lines, we've been working as an SID board to make some improvements to try and tie into this development. I believe this week, I think it was actually yesterday, there was a parks meeting where we're in the process of extending and finishing a trail segment that would extend from the lake down near the Waterford Clubhouse on 151st and go all the way up to 153rd to kind of bring people closer towards this development. And when I had originally proposed that, I was hoping that it would tie into the commercial development and not more of a retail or a storage facility. And then finally, I did actually, just kind of on short notice, since I didn't know that this meeting, or this had got moved to this meeting for today, threw up a Nextdoor poll on the Nextdoor social app just to kind of see what the general sentiment of the neighborhood, not only Waterford, but the surrounding neighborhoods such as Stone Creek, Stone Park, Shadowbrook, Meadowbrook, just to see what they had felt about it. And we had, in 24 hours, about 100 people respond to that poll. 96% of them were opposed to putting a storage facility there. And I specifically worded it as an outdoor storage facility. So to sum everything up, I really, well, like I said, I'm not opposed to having any storage facility there. As currently slated, I think there's a lot better of an option to go with for this particular property.
Thank
Jeremy,
you.
can I ask you a quick question? I was going to ask the question earlier, but I forgot. The high school.
Yeah.
A year and a half or so?
I think they were saying 2021, 2022 is when that would be completed.
And where will that be in proximity to this site?
I think there's going to be an entrance potentially right across the street from Casey's. That's kind of my understanding of it. And again, I don't know if that's set in stone, but that Iowa Street exit of the neighborhood, approximately right there is where I think one of them is going to be.
So it's be on the west side of 156th Street?
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay.
West side of 156.
So so the reason I ask that is I'm thinking of the Elkhorn South High School and the development that has occurred around Elkhorn South High School, all the commercial development that's occurred around that. It's been a lot, but it took a while.
Yeah, exactly. And now that we finally have the development in that part of town, I think it's going to take off.
Thank you.
I appreciate your testimony, and especially serving on the SID board, because I've done that a few times, and I realize how fun that is.
Yeah, it's my second round.
Yeah, you're a glutton. The one thing you didn't mention, and I'm very aware of Buc-ee's and the other storage facilities, or not Buc-ee's, still got Buc-ee's on my mind. Dino's, all of them are 4 stories and about 120, 130,000 feet, all climate controlled, obviously, by design. And it's a pretty expensive product, but it's your 4 stories. I find it hard to believe that you would rather have a Dino's than a single story facility. I'm just curious the logic behind that.
like I said, my personal thought process on it is it's a more appealing commercial-looking structure as opposed to a row of garage doors. I just drove by the one today on 72nd and Maple, and I think that one is like 3.5 stories.
It's huge.
And it is. It's large, but it's more dense, and you're not going to have the potential to have that, outdoor junkyard, I guess, feel, I guess, for the lack of a better term. I mean, I've been to storage facilities, some of the outdoor ones where, pallets end up getting piled outside because someone, left pallets in their storage unit. Inevitably, there's always more of an industrial feel to the outdoor unit as opposed to an indoor unit.
It's interesting because most of the people that were here at the time, but this board got sued by the neighbors at 204th and Farnham because the 4-story facility that was built out there just south of Dodge.
Yep, I think I remember reading about that in the World Herald.
And but I mean that blocked a lot of people's views, and this is just a different. But I appreciate your points.
And at least sorry not to interrupt or anything, but in this instance, like they had already said, the lot is set down lower than the other houses anyways, and there's not really a view to be blocking in this instance. So I think it might be one of those things where even if it is 3 stories, but you're set down a story below the houses below you, it might only be level with the back of their house or a little bit below it still. I think it could be worked out to still be appealing. If they shrunk it down to a more dense unit as opposed to, like I said, spreading over 7 acres of outdoor garages.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any additional opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city, please? Sure. Oh. Do you have any rebuttal you would like to make? Sure, if you'd like to.
Randy Kushak with Lamper Nearson, 14710 West Dodge Road. Just wanted to clear up a couple items that were mentioned. The actual component of the plat that would be for the convenience storage use is actually 5.4 acres. There's an additional, the remainder of the acreage of platted ground minus the right-of-way that we'd be dedicating for 154th Street would be 2.64 for the retail office use. And the other item, outdoor storage is a little bit it's not what we're proposing here. Outdoor vehicle storage is not allowed. All of the storage would be interior to the buildings. It'll be indoor storage, some of it climate controlled, some of it not climate controlled. And all the doors for the storage buildings face interior to the property. So we're basically ringing that around. There's buffer yards on all 4 sides of the convenience storage property, as well as the right-of-way of 154th, the additional buffer that we've tried to make on the east side of that right-of-way to get some trees along that side, get a little bit of space from the backyard and a potential fence that could be there to give that a little bit more room. With the grades, that pulls us down and will help keep those sight lines so we're not looking at a bank of doors straight from a residential property. So I just wanted to clear up a few of those items of what the development has going.
Thank you.
And Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road. A couple other clarifications. So just to be clear, we don't do the Dino's storage, 72nd Maple. That's not what Dragon Storage is. The other thing is we are subject to the mixed-use development agreement's design guidelines. So all of our buildings, even every storage facility, will always comply with currently what's of record. So we're not requesting any changes or modifications to those design guidelines. So we will be subject to those modifications. I know, and that's a question that we've gotten a lot, is what will the buildings look like? They will look like what's required by the design guidelines.
What about the view is the testimony when the neighbor said that he doesn't want to look at garage doors. He doesn't want to see outside storage, and we know it's not outside storage, but it's interior storage. When you did that cutaway on the view corridor, if you're in those homes, are you going to see garage doors, or are you going to see over them?
mean, the reality is, so these folks, these are their homes, looking out, by far, they'll be seeing either this right of way or these trees. And this is a pretty good distance, well, we don't have the exact measurement, but it's a pretty good distance away before you're gonna see perhaps that garage door right there.
Yeah.
But again, that's assuming they're seeing through the trees, the landscaping,
In
the
the winter,
fence,
okay.
the roadway, the sidewalks, all that sort of improvements there.
Thank you.
Are those evergreen trees or are
They will. There'll be a mix of both of them. And again, that was part of the discussions. We want to be very mindful of what sort of landscaping we're putting in there because we get it. We're mindful of what the use is, and so adding that additional landscaping has always been part of the plan.
Thank you. Now may we hear from the city, please?
Sure. So to reiterate, request is for preliminary plat and also a major amendment to the mixed-use district development agreement. Staff had recommended approval back in July. There were a few changes that were needed. Ultimately it was laid over. The applicant, as they have addressed, they did modify most of those requirements regarding the buffer yards, moving of the office building, and therefore staff does recommend approval of the major amendment subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding the request to City Council, and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 10 conditions listed in your recommendation report being addressed with or prior to submittal of a final plat.
Thank you. I know we've had discussion and some questions already. Do we have any other discussion or questions?
I guess I just wanted to make a statement of clarification that this application is consistent with the zoning that's in place. And the process that we're going through is to make sure that everything works in that regard. We aren't an aesthetic board. It's not our judgment to take a poll of does this building look good or not. But this is a permitted use within this particular development. And whether it's a wise financial choice or not, that's the buyer's purview to see that this works. And the seller of the land, he wants to sell his land, the original developer. And so that's the way America works. And I think, from that perspective, I'd like to make a motion. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make a motion for approval of a major amendment subject to submittal of an accepted mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding to the request of City Council, and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 10 items addressed in the in the staff report before submittal of the final plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
No.
Morris?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Request approved.
Moving on to agenda item number 12. Case number C8-18-228. The applicant is Nakia Vasserbrai. The request is approval of a special use permit to allow large group living in an R7 district. This was laid over from the October 3rd meeting. Location is 4548 Bedford Avenue. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Yes, hi, I'm Nakia Basserbrai, 4548 Bedford Avenue, and I am the administrator, Bridging Hands LLC. And I got the information in the mail, the recommendation that you guys required for me. I was nervous because I thought I had to have it all done by today, and I just got it in the mail on Saturday. So I rushed down and talked to Robert LaRocco yesterday, and he went over some things that you guys recommended that I needed to do in order for this to move forward, which was fine. The only thing that I opposed was number 3. It recommended that I remove the right-of-way. And like I said before, I don't need it. It's one staff member there, which is myself or one of my other employees that's there at all times. I understand, that they want me to remove it, but I don't, and I have a picture of it, I'm sure you guys do too. I don't know, does light automatically? Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, so this is the driveway here. So I have an extended driveway, and I think they want me to remove this extended part right here. Is that what they want me to remove in order to operate?
Yeah, the property lines on that map are not 100% accurate.
Okay.
But any portion of that parking area outside of your property, that's not the perpendicular driveway.
Right. And when I bought the house, it was that way, and it's been that way for well over a decade. So, I mean, if I have to remove it, I will, but I just don't see the point of me having to remove that in order to operate, because I still have that extended driveway that I can use, I don't have to necessarily use that, if you guys don't want me to, so.
Okay.
But that's it.
Anything else? Okay.
No.
All right, thank you. Do we have any proponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city, please?
Sure. So this request was laid over last month. The request is for 12 residents based on the square footage of that the house provides. You're not able to, the size of the home, you're not able to provide 200 square feet, which is a zoning code requirement per resident with 12 residents. Therefore, we are supportive of 10 residents as that can meet that required square footage. Based on the limited number of employees and visitors on the site, the unique clientele of this facility with them being non-drivers, staff can support a reduction in the required number of parking spaces for this applicant only for this use. We do not have any record of a right-of-way lease that would have allowed that parking pad within the city right-of-way. Therefore, that's why we are conditioning for the removal of that paving in the city right-of-way, which is common whenever we have a use permit in that type of circumstance. One other important item to note is that all applicable building and fire code requirements must be met and maintained. There will be a requirement of certificate of occupancy, so I strongly encourage the applicant to work with permits and inspections to make sure you know what that entails.
Okay.
Specifically, bedroom space, making sure there's proper ingress and egress, and what is allowed to be considered bedroom or not. So you'll want to make sure you do that so that you're not surprised by any large cost that could come up as a result. And I don't deal with the building code specifically, but I would strongly encourage that.
Yeah,
Because
I
that'll
will.
be something they inspect during the certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
Therefore, staff recommends approval of the special use permit to allow large group living subject to the 9 conditions listed in the recommendation report. And just to reiterate, one of those is to have a maximum of 10 residents.
Thank you. We've heard from the city. Do we have any comments or questions?
Hey, a quick question for Eric. You mentioned that there's no record of a right-of-way lease, which is why you want the that off-street parking removed from the right-of-way and setback. What's that process? Would it be easier for her just to get a lease for that right-of-way? Or what's that process, I guess, is my question.
Thank you. I was going to ask the same.
We would need to include the Parks Department because that is a boulevard. So there's kind of usually Public Works, the right-of-way is under their domain, but anytime there's parks and parkways and boulevards, there's that extra set of criteria. So, I mean, we could have that discussion with them, but I don't have an answer today. Now, usually a right-of-way lease, if somebody wants to lease an area for a parking stall outside their home, there is a process and an application that is made to Planning and Public Works. We do a review of whether that can be supported. Certain right-of-way leases go to City Council, other right-of-way leases can be approved administratively.
So what's the best way to approve this, giving her the option to leave number 3 open-ended, to let her talk to the Parks Department and have those discussions while still getting this moved forward for her? Or is that possible?
Sure, give me a moment just to read through it here.
Okay.
I suppose you could add, so number 3, it reads, submit a revised site plan showing all off-street parking is removed from the Fontenelle Boulevard right-of-way and setback. And you could probably add or enter into an acceptable right-of-way lease subject to city staff or subject to the necessary approval process.
Nikki, now, Eric, you said she should meet with permits and to get her certificate of occupancy, correct?
Yes, that's what I had to do in order to get licensed anyway, so that's
Okay.
not a problem.
So you'll do that before you take out the driveway and everything, because if they come in and said you don't have enough room or you don't have the windows, you don't want to necessarily pull everything out. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Okay,
right,
all right.
right.
Well, and the certificate of occupancy is the last thing to do. Usually, if you had a brand-new business, a retail store, you'd have a certificate of occupancy, and you'd have multiple inspections from different inspectors, basically right before that business can open up.
But if she pulls out her driveway and then doesn't qualify for the 2 extra people, I mean, is that?
Well, the pavement in the driveway wouldn't necessarily impact the square footage of the home or
No,
the
but I mean,
resident.
but she.
But yes, the costs involved.
Yeah.
Or even, if she
You're grandfathered
discovers.
in right now.
Yeah, if she discovers that there's gonna have to be ingress or egress put into basements or any, I don't know what the basement looks like.
I did have to do that.
Okay.
So that's already in place,
Okay.
so, everything is already in place.
All
It's just the parking that's the issue for me, so.
And are you okay with the reduction from 12 to 10?
I'm perfectly fine with that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I did the waiver yesterday, so I took care of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I motion for approval of the special use permit to allow large group living subject to the 9 conditions in the department's recommendation report, but I would like to add to number 3, or enter into an acceptable right-of-way lease subject to the necessary approval process. So,
The 10 people are you there?
yeah.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please call the vote?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
request approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck.
I probably got a ticket.
Okay, agenda item number 14. Case C7-18-139, C10-18-154. The applicant is Rita Homsey. The request is approval of a conditional use permit to allow Food Sales Limited in a LO district and approval of an MCC Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District. This was laid over from the July 11th meeting. The location is 1938 North 85th Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Douglas Dreesen, 10836 Old Mill Road, appearing on and with the applicant and one of our young engineers who's done a lot of the work on the site. Trying to keep this brief for you. What we have is an existing Mediterranean grocery. It's kind of a specialty grocery at this location. He's been successful there, and he's running into storage problems. He'd like to expand the site, but he really can't afford to go out of business to raise the site for a period of time and then start over. So we've worked with planning department, and they've been pretty helpful in trying to put together kind of a 2-phase plan where he can get half of his new building built while keeping his old building under operation to transition the business into the first half of his new building and then commence construction of the second building, ultimately resulting in a facility probably twice as big as what he's got now. That's kind of a tough site, as you can tell if you've been up there. It's a residential kind of conversion area. So it's been a struggle to get through it, and again, with the help of the staff, I think we've gotten to that point. You do see 10 conditions on there. We're agreeable with all 10 of those conditions. And with that, I'd humbly ask your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any proponents? Any opponents who wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city, please?
Sure. Yeah, this project has been ongoing for quite a while, and we've worked with the development team, and we're glad that we can get to a point and recommend approval and hopefully get this new building constructed. So staff recommends approval of the MCC Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District and approval of the conditional use permit to allow food sales limited in LO District subject to the 10 conditions listed in the recommendation report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I just want to commend them for continuing to work on it. Find a way to make this work, and I'm glad it's working for you.
I will move approval of the MCC Major Commercial Corridor Overlay District and approval of the conditional use permit to allow food sales limited in an LO district subject to the 10 conditions listed in the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. 3 seconds. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
request approved.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Okay, on to agenda item number 17, case C3-18-239. The applicant is the Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. The request is approval of the Ames Innovation Center TIF redevelopment project plan. The location is 4606 North 56th Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. Get you oriented first here. The Ames Innovation Center is a building rehab project in our TIF program. It's located on 56th Street, North 56th Street. Can you bring it up? Just a little bit north of Ames Avenue. Like I said, it's building rehab. This is a pretty large building. It's initially a bowling alley, about 44,000 square feet. Had been home to a church congregation at one point. It's been vacant for a while. It's in pretty rough shape. White Lotus Group is the project developer. They are taking care of code violations now and are fixing up the building, doing the stabilization. I really should have probably brought a picture of the existing building. It's a fairly homely building. So that's kind of an understatement as well. But their vision for the building is definitely going to be a transformation. Okay, this rehab will create kind of a high-tech shared office space, like a business incubator, small business incubator, with shared overhead. State of Nebraska will be leasing about 10% of the space. Investment in the neighborhood is about $5.68 million. Their TIF request is $486,146. Complies with the TIF program criteria. It's an appropriate land use. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any proponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Klein, 2046 North 48th Avenue, and I'm representing White Lotus. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for him? Okay. Any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city, please?
Recommend approval.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Just commend White Lotus for doing something like this. Recommend approval. Second.
We have a motion and second. Lisa, would you please take the vote?
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid. Madam Chair,
Yes.
request approved.
Okay, on to agenda item number 18, case C3-18-159. The applicant is the Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. The request is approval of the Little Italy Apartments on Pierce TIF redevelopment project plan. The location is southeast of 10th and Pierce Streets. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Okay, good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. This TIF project is a fairly large 5-story apartment building, new construction on a collection of parcels located at the southeast corner of 10th and Pierce Streets. These will be market rate rental apartments, including 1, 2, studio 1 and 2-bedroom units, total of 83 units in the structure upon completion. This is immediately south of the old market area of the Central Business District and kind of on the northern tier of the Dahlman neighborhood area. An area that's seen a few TIF projects recently, mostly residential. An area that also has an active neighborhood association, a couple of them actually. And I'm told the developer has reached out and has had a number of meetings with the neighbors. The applicant is the Avante Group LLC. Manager is Eric Weisler. They have designed the building after working with closely with the city planning's urban design staff. So the building has gone through a couple redesigns, and here's where it's at presently. This would be 10th and Pierce, looking kind of southeast. The total project cost is a little over $15.4 million, a pretty substantial investment in the neighborhood. TIF support requested is $2,300,000. This project complies with the criteria of the city's TIF program. It's an appropriate use for the area, and it's consistent with the goals of the city's comprehensive master plan. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any proponents?
Arnold Breslow, President of Old Market South Neighborhood Association, which overlaps Dahlman. We have worked very closely with these fine gentlemen, and they have done a tremendous job trying to make a nice modern building fit in to the neighborhood. They've been conscious of the grading and keeping the building so it doesn't look a lot larger than what's there as far as you go up 10th Street, coming from the old market headed to the zoo. One of the things they did is the building originally looked taller, and they took that top, I guess I can do it here, the top story, and actually set it back so the building appears shorter than it actually is. They've also put balconies out there, and they have just really bent over backwards for us. So we would love to have this in the neighborhood and appreciate you supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents?
Eric Weisler, 9217 Davenport Street. I'm the developer for the project, here to answer any questions. Thanks, Trenton.
Except from Trenton.
Any additional proponents? Any opponents wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. May we hear from the city?
Sure. The planning board did previously see a consolidation of the zoning to the R7 district as well as a conditional use permit, which you had recommended for approval regarding today's TIF application. Staff recommends approval.
I recommend approval. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please take the vote?
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
On to agenda item number 20, case C10-18-184, C12-18-185, applicant is Robert E. McGuire. The request is preliminary and final plat approval of McGuire Estates, a minor plat inside the city limits with rezoning from R5, R7, and GI to R7. The location is northeast of Commercial Avenue and Sailor Street. And we hear from the applicant, please.
I'm Robert McGuire, 2884 Martin Avenue. I have some, kind of permission to approach, I have some maps that are.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's just been some confusion on this. What we have here at 4405 Commercial Avenue, the actual address is already R7. Now, I have purchased a minor lot that's a hillside and a railroad property, neither one of which have been platted within the city of Omaha. They're tax lot 23 is what they are. I simply wanted to add them to 4405 and make it one lot. And like I say, 4405 is R7. The entire Reinhardt's addition is R7. I want to stay within that guideline. I discussed it with a few folks here earlier, Mr. Carter and a couple other folks, and we had discussed possibly putting some little houses in that area. That was just a thought. It's not a real plan. What started this entire thing is I had a house there I bought for my daughter. She moved out and ended up with an empty house. And I wanted to build my shop there for McGuire Home Services. That's my company. And well, somebody's burned the house down now. And I had torn it down, and there's nothing but straight land there. But anyhow, I purchased that one lot for $100, and I purchased the railroad lot for $3,000, and now I purchased 4409 for $650. The valuations in this area are so low that for $1 million, I could buy the entire neighborhood twice. It's not that funny. I mean, it is, but it's not. This all started with the stadium. I wrote a letter to then mayor at the time when he asked for suggestions of where to put the stadium. I said, well, Your Honor, there's plenty of land here. You could put the stadium here, and it would spur growth in this neighborhood. Literally. I mean, there's been nothing there for 50 years. This railroad lot that I bought, they sold it to someone else in the 1940s. He abandoned it. He never even filed to have it put in his name. And he died a few years ago, so it went back to the Union Pacific, and they sold it to me because they couldn't find anybody else to buy it. As it is, it's not usable. It's mostly a hillside, a little strip of land on top of a hillside, used mainly as a trash dump. I've been cleaning this property for 10 years, and I want to put something there so that people will want to live there. Like I said, we talked about tiny houses. Well, I finally took my wife on our honeymoon to Las Vegas, and I found a place out there that I kind of want to mimic. It's called Container Park. They took several shipping containers, welded them together, and made an entire community out of them. And I would like to do something like that here. But again, it's still just in the idea phase. And for me to do that, I will need financing, and I know a few people that have that kind of money. I personally do not. You know, if I don't get some financing, it's going to stay basically a trash dump, and I'll clean it up, and I'll clean it up until I die. But in order to get these people to help me finance this, I need to be able to show them, hey, the city is with me on this. They want to see something happen here. And so far, all I'm getting is they want a single-family home there. Well, there's no profit in that for like a J. Noddle or White Lotus. And these are the kind of people, actually, namely Mike Hogan. I don't know, Michael Luke Hogan, not Michael James. You may know Michael James. But his son has inherited his money. but before I even ask him for a penny of it, and he's a very good friend of mine, been a friend of mine for almost 30 years. But I'm not gonna ask him for any money until I can say, hey, Mike, look, the city's okay with this. They wanna see some improvement in this area. And I wanna be the one that does it. Cause like I say, nobody has done anything in this area for years. I grew up in North Omaha, and I don't remember ever seeing anything on this lot but trees and trash. And I want to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional proponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. May we hear from the city?
Sure. So the request before us is plat and rezone 1.5 acres into one lot. So the requested zoning is to consolidate the different zoning designations to R7. The future land use element of the city's master plan supports low-density residential for this area. Therefore, we cannot support the rezoning to R7. We can support R5 zoning, which is the highest allowed density of low-density residential. Now, it's true that may not afford the applicant, the proper zoning for what he wants to do. I think it should be mentioned that, the idea of tiny homes or shipping containers in homes, and renting out for short-term stays has been brought up to us. And we would view that as a commercial use type and wouldn't be allowed in the proposed R7 zoning as it is. Now, if it was, there are some different housing options allowed within the R5 district that isn't specifically single family. Specifically, there's duplexes and townhomes that are allowed. We also have the option to do low-density, multiple family style housing with the R6 PUD tool that we have used for other projects. That could be a possibility. Now, that's not the request before us. I'm just throwing out ideas. We would love to see redevelopment in this area, but based on the master plan, we cannot support that rezoning to the R7 district. So we are recommending denial of the rezoning to R7, but approval of the rezoning to R5, approval of the preliminary plat subject to the 2 conditions listed in the recommendation report, and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval, along with submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement if necessary prior to city council.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion?
So Eric, on this diagram, it shows that he handed out, shows the GI on the kind of the southeast side. And on our page 20, the first page of this case, it doesn't show that GI portion. Is there a portion of this that is GI, as it says in our request? And is that big enough to build a shop on?
Yes, there is a small portion of the site that is currently zoned GI. There's also a portion R7 and R5. So he has 3 existing zoning districts. The GI portion, I don't know the exact size, but considering the entire site is 1.5 acres, I would be very skeptical that anything could be developed on that industrial zoning.
Because you'd have, the parking and everything would have to be on that
Yes.
GI zone portion.
Yes, and you have the fact of buffer yards and things like that.
Yeah, it's small.
Yeah.
Can I address that?
Yes.
Come on.
Okay, also on, I don't know if it's on that map, but on,
Could you get your name and address again, please?
the,
Sir, could I have you give your name and address again,
oh,
please?
again, yeah, Robert McGuire, 2884 Martin Avenue.
Thank you.
Trying to. Okay, well, I guess I don't have a map that shows it. But through the center of that, there's a 24-foot wide easement for a 9-foot diameter sewer line, which basically separates us into 2 separate lots. Now, the north one, 4405 Commercial Avenue, is already R7, and I can go forward with it as such. And I bought 4409, is working its way through the courts now. I don't want to abandon the southern part. on the opposite side of this pipe, which is the GI part. Coming from a GI to an R7 is lowering, I believe. And sure, the railroad is R5, but I think that was just done wrong. When everything else is R7. And I was just talking with TD2 that, you know, maybe the best thing to do is just abandon the whole project and start over with 4405 and 4409. But I don't want to do that, because that means that lot that's been sitting there vacant for 80 plus years, collecting trash and trees, is going to continue to do that. I want to include it. I want to build into that hillside. I want to take out some of the dirt and put in some structure, put some hillside in there, whether it's tiny houses, container houses, or whatever the city would like to see there. As long as they would like to see something besides trash and trees.
Thank you.
And that's my objective. You know, I don't really care whether it's a container, a tiny house, big houses, but it needs to be multiple houses in order to make it financially feasible because of the size of that area and the restriction from the 24-foot easement on the north end of that lot. It's a hillside. And plus the lot between there and the street prevents that. He won't sell it, at least not at a reasonable price. Well, maybe if I can get this done and get some financing, then maybe I can get him to sell that lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we've heard from the city. Do we have a motion?
I will move to deny rezoning from R5, R7, and GI to R7, approval of the rezoning from R5, R7, and GI to R5, and approval of the preliminary plat subject to the two conditions outlined in the report, and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of the preliminary plat approval, along with the submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement, if necessary, prior to forwarding to this plat to the city council.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Lisa, could you take the vote, please?
Magid?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, on to agenda item number 23, case C10-18-247, C12-18-248. The applicant is Blondo 180 LLC. The request is preliminary plat approval of Blue Stem Meadows, a subdivision located outside the city limits, with rezoning from AG to DR, R4, R6, and MU. The location is northwest of 180th and Blondo Streets. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. This is actually a Mulholland development. They currently own the property, and it's currently being used as a tree farm. As you know, we were on the consent agenda for approval. There were a couple items in the recommendation report that we felt that we wanted to work with the staff about before we actually move this case forward, and we have a little time to work with. So we moved that recommendation on the consent agenda from approval to a consent agenda item for layover. So there's, like I said, two items that we want to work with staff on, and so that's why we wanted to change the recommendation to a layover. So with that, I think I did want to add, we had a neighborhood meeting on October 30th. There was probably 40, 45 people in attendance. We actually sent an email and/or called everyone that put their name on a list to tell them that we were laying this item over in hopes that we weren't going to be here at 3:30 listening to this deal. But in any event, we'll hear what their concerns are, and then we'll respond. But this will be on either next month, I would imagine. We think that the items that we need to talk to planning and public works about will be resolved. So with that, I'll hear from any opponents.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any proponents? Any opponents? Come on up.
My name's Tammy Campbell Peterson, 12472 Evans Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68164. and I'm also speaking for Deborah Campbell, Douglas County. Here. 68022. Put this on here. This is This is the, so this is regarding Blue Stem Meadows. This is the map that we got in the last 2 weeks of the development. But we're going to talk about the property that's going to be 10.1 acres here, which is going south. This is Blondo. Here's 180th. Here's Mulhall's here. Deborah has 10.1 acres of farmland here in the green belt, and I have 10.1 acres of farmland here, which normally would just stay like it is. But the city, because of the bridge that's going to be going over 180th from over the railroad and Old Lincoln Highway, Deborah's 10.1 acres, the city is going to make a forced acquisition, we call it, of 6.4 acres of hers. Mine is they're going to take 4.83 acres, leaving me with 5.27. So we're out of the green belt. That leaves us half of a ravine, and what it's going to leave us with is they are going to take some frontage, but mostly they're taking the back. So we're going to be left with just a little bit of property on the front of both of our sections with nothing we can do with it. So what we're thinking is if this gets put in, because we were told only so much mixed development can be in that intersection, but if this goes through, is this going to block our ability to be able to sell our property that we basically are going to have to, because there's not going to be much left of it. So that's why we're here today, to be added on the next meeting as part of this for their rezoning, to see if that can be kept in consideration so that they don't get all the zoning and then we're just left with a little piece of property we can do nothing with.
Okay, we can have Eric address that when it's his turn to speak. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other opponents? Okay, would you like rebuttal time? Actually, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and then we'll do the rebuttal.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. All I would say is that is a county project, one that's been long in the works as far as funding and planning, as far as the 180th Street Viaduct coming over. So we really, this corner that we have has nothing to do with the taking. That was always proposed by the county, and I think it even has federal funding, and I'm sure Ryan can add to that too, Mr. Haas. But in any event, this is a convenience mixed-use area on this intersection, so this is what's being proposed here is consistent with the master plan. Everything we believe is being proposed is also consistent with the site regulators and consistent with the master plan and consistent with the mixed-use zoning. Again, there were only 2 items on the recommendation report that we felt that we needed to discuss a little further to make sure we were on the same page, so we had a clean record going up to the council. So with that, I'm not sure how we can deal with their property. I think the taking is something that has to occur for the roadway systems, and it's nothing that's caused by this particular development. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. May we hear from the city, please? Somebody would have to call you up. And please give your name and address again.
Tammy Campbell Peterson, 12472 Evans Street. We're not saying that by their building that they were trying to change everything, and we know that that property has to go to the city. We're just saying, could we be allowed, you know, look at our property too in the development of this corner so we don't get blocked out for the usage, the mixed usage, so that on one corner they'll have everything and then there'll be no use for that and it'll be used up, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Deborah Campbell, 18727 Blondo. Probably I'm repeating this, but we're looking for the mixed usage to be extended from not only the Moha property, but also to the south, and include the, how many acres, the combined? Because there's a narrow strip of property, if it was involved in that mixed usage section. Behind that, south of that, is the huge ravine, and then south of that is property that the city or county wants to take to make a wetlands, I'm sorry. And then you have the railroad, then you have Old Lincoln Highway, and then you have, houses and Dodge Street. So the only strip of property left is on the north side of the ravine. And if it was also zoned of the mixed usage to go inclusive with the Moha property, that way ours is not left out and, like she said, just a strip of piece of property that we can't farm, we can't do anything with. It's just sitting there. But it's big enough to put some type of businesses down there if it was zoned properly.
So, Eric, is the request for the Mulholland land take up all of the mixed use allocated for that corner?
So this intersection of 180th and Blondo Street is designated as a 10-acre convenience mixed-use area.
Okay.
The development proposal before us would take up 9.7 acres of the office commercial. In addition to the office commercial availability, all of our mixed-use centers allow a certain amount of multiple family residential units. With this area being a 10-acre center, that does allow up to 250 adjacent multifamily units, which is also what is proposed before us today with the development. I don't know the particulars of the future road bridge alignment and what the county is needing to purchase to make that happen. I have not seen that layout. I can tell you with that drainage area south of Blondo Street, there is a large portion of their property within the floodplain. The portions within the floodway are not usually developable. Now, areas within the flood fringe, as you get further out from that drainage way, it's possible to develop that, with compliance of an acceptable floodplain development permit and the likes. I don't know, I could call Ryan Haas up. I don't know if he has any further knowledge of what the bridge would lay out. I just haven't been part of those conversations with that project. It's been, the planning has been going on for a long time. I know that it's coming at some point in the future. I guess I would strongly encourage them to have conversations with the development team of this project. Anytime there is a center with available office and commercial acres or multifamily, we encourage all parties to meet and to have discussions. I guess I just don't know what could possibly be done with the land south of Blondo, because I don't know what is being purchased from the county and whatnot.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing? Tammy Campbell, Peterson. That front part has been designated as not being in the floodplain. If it's raised, I think it's 3 feet. The city is actually sending someone out next week to appraise it, for the bridge, so it is going forward. We just got this letter yesterday from the city. It shows her plot, what's going to be taken, and mine, and he's looking at mine right there. But yeah, it just came in the mail, so we thought with this meeting, we needed to at least get in contact and with you guys just to make sure that this can go forward together instead of we just step back and get lost.
Well, and anytime there is request to to utilize the office, the available office and commercial lots, you know, it does come in on application basis. So I don't know if you've had any conversations with, you know, engineering or companies that would assist in that. There are also other specifics of, you know, within the mixed-use guidelines, you can't just have one commercial building. It usually takes at least 2 to 3 acres, configuration of groupings of buildings, required plaza and open space. So there's other items that usually a 10-acre center would not be possible to be split up among the 4 intersections. Okay, when you have the larger centers such as 80 acres, 165 acres, there's much more area to go around to incorporate on all portions of the intersection. 10-acre centers can be very challenging, and although we encourage, you know, coordination between adjacent property owners and developers, you know, it puts the city in a difficult position. We don't want to have to choose, so we always tell them to coordinate with adjacent properties. And
So that's maybe something you guys can discuss offline, if you can share information.
Yeah, I was just going to have one thing.
Somebody want to call Larry up?
Thank you. Yeah, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. I did want to point out, because I think it is important to see this, and I was actually, Aaron covered part of it, but if you zoom in here, this is the property that we're talking about here. There are 2 parcels. You notice there's a little bit of ag here, and then you've got ag flood fringe, and then you've got a pretty significant ag floodway, which you can't do anything in. And remember, you can only fill 25% of the flood plain or flood fringe, and so those are issues. And then with respect to the mixed use, remember, you have to have a grouping of buildings, you have to have 10% office space requirements, you have to have post-construction stormwater management covered, you have to have the 15-foot buffer yards. I mean, unfortunately, there's just, after the taking for them, there's just not enough property to really develop it for mixed use. So this is really the only corner that has an opportunity to really max out the 10-acre convenience mixed-use center. They could request, I suppose, a variance, because you can always go up by 20% if there's some reason to do that. So I guess you could get to the 12 acres if you needed to, but even if you got to the 12 acres, I'm not sure you could possibly accommodate all the requirements of a mixed-use area on these properties when you have floodway, flood fringe, and you've got all the other requirements to develop that property. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Okay, we have closed the public hearing. Can we hear from the department, please?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, it's Larry question. Have you been apprised of anything from the county as it relates to the pathway for, I assume by looking at this plat that the Blondo has some realignment.
It's my understanding that it shifts to the north a little
Right,
bit, yes.
right.
And that's to accommodate the viaduct as it comes down and meets where 180th Street, I'm sorry, Blondo Street, where it can after it comes off of its slope. So again, I haven't seen the actual plans for the viaduct, but those plans are pretty much in place, and I believe.
Also, your engineer must have access to something more definitive than what they have.
Yes, I'll let Kyle add to that if you would like, but I think the right-of-way has been established as far as at least the boundary of it, so.
Okay.
Hi, Kyle Vol, E&A Consulting, 10909 Mill Valley Road. Yes, we have received both PDFs and CAD files of the proposed 180th Street widening and Blondo Street widening, and Larry's correct, that intersection does shift to the north as they're coming over the viaduct, over the creek, to get back to grade, so that intersection at 180th and Blondo is an at-grade intersection. Our plat is dedicating additional outlot there to accommodate that future roadway section.
And obviously, with that realignment, there's going to be restrictions vis-a-vis their land as to where it could even be accessed.
Yeah, access would
from
probably
Blondo
be
at that point.
difficult
So
to the east.
I just recommend that you speak with them. They appear to have more knowledge of what's going on there than you may have, and also what the possibility of you being able to do anything with your land. And then with that, you might be able to see what your path forward might be.
Thank you. Can we hear from the city, please?
Sure. There's a recommendation for approval in your packet, but with the request for the layover from the applicant, we definitely support meeting with them and support the layover.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Do we have a
Move to
motion?
layover. Second.
Motion and second. Lisa, will you call the vote, please?
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate.
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay, layover approved.
You guys might want to
Good luck.
catch him out there.
If you want
get
to,
some information.
if you want this back, ma'am, you can come up.
Okay, on to.
Good luck, ladies.
Yeah. Agenda item number 29, case C7-16-100, Relevant Community Church, care of Corey Nelson is the applicant. Request is approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow religious assembly in a R4 district. A portion of the property is located in a flood fringe overlay district. The location is 21220 Elkhorn Drive. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Lee Hammond, McGrath North Law Firm, 1601 Dodge Street, Omaha. I'm appearing on behalf of the applicant, Relevant Community Church. And what the amendment that we're proposing is simply to increase the sign budget for a civic activity in an R4 district. The allowed budget is 32 square feet, and we're proposing to increase that by 48.25 feet. And I will give you just an idea of what the site looks like. Along here is Maple. This is Elkhorn Drive here. This is the new church facility. So one 32-foot sign on what I'd call the north corner, and another 32-foot, it's a backlit glass sign on the front of the building that faces Elkhorn Drive. And then the proposed monument sign would be, if you can make out the little red line there. So we have enough budget for one of the corner signs, and all we need is additional budget. The site is rather large. Visibility is limited from Maple Street, and we're just trying to make it noticeable to the public without being obtrusive. The logo that's backlit, those would be the two signs on each corner of the building, those two corners of the building. We've heard, and this would be the monument sign out in the front by the detention pond. We've heard talked to the neighbors. Some expressed some concern over the brightness, and the concern appears to center, there's architectural glass along the facade. It's opaque glass, and it's backlit with LEDs. That's not part of the sign, it's just an architectural feature. On the, what I would call the Elkhorn Drive side of the building, again, the architectural glass continues and it tapers as you go to the south, so it diminishes. This glass is opaque, it's backlit with the LEDs. It's a programmable lighting system. It will not be on all night. It's dimmable, so the plan is to dim it down for when it is on in the evenings, and it would just be on for activities and for a few hours after dusk. So I think that's really the architectural glass is not part of the sign, so it's really not part of the discussion here, but there's some concern over that, so I wanted to make sure that you were aware that we're perfectly comfortable working with the neighbors, and it's not a projecting light or anything like that. It's just a opaque glass with backlighting. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Do you have any opponents?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of Planning Board. Brent Beller, 1144 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of Patrick Hastings. Patrick and his family are here also as a representative of the homeowners association to the west, Michelle Cheadle. Before I get going, I have a letter on behalf of the HOA. And I'll read just a couple snippets of that letter. Unfortunately, we're here in opposition. I think by and large, no one opposes the church being there, but this sign and the lighting coming off the church is just completely disrupted everybody to the west of this development. You know, it's somewhat awkward opposing a church, and being a religious guy myself, you know, you never know who's watching above, but unfortunately that's where we are today. So hopefully I don't send myself somewhere. So up till now, and again, this all kind of happened here in the last week. So as I understand it, the church, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as they finished their construction, finally they turned on this sign and these lights. And to steal Patrick's version of really what happened, if we've all seen the movie Christmas Story, where Clark turns on the lights and the neighbors just go like that, that's how it was. Christmas Vacation. Sorry, thank you for the correction. And I mean, kidding aside, when they turn their lights off in their house, their entire house is still lit. So when he's putting his son to bed, that bedroom's lit, and that's how bright these lights are. And again, it might be a situation where they're testing out their lights, but the reason we're in opposition is because I might disagree with Lee on his connotation that the sign they're requesting that you approve is not part of this, you know, the light that's up there. But I think it kind of does. So just to give a little bit of context, so the church itself, this is an older photo, obviously, but they're right up here. So the HOA and the subdivision is, here are the Hastings, here's Miss Cheadle's residence. These guys all sit up, so they look down onto the church, which is why that light is really shining onto them, and it's projecting out. These are.
Where are we?
Okay, yeah, sorry. Maple Street is up here to the north. Church is the hard
To go
corner.
south.
That's
to go
right.
Okay, I
This
gotcha.
is going south. This slopes down. Everybody's sloping down to the landscaping pateras down here, and these are nice acreages, 10 acreages with beautiful homes on them. The reality is everyone that's in this subdivision bought it for the tranquility, being out under the stars, being close enough to the city of Omaha, but not necessarily in the city of Omaha, which is obviously why they're really upset with having this sort of lighting coming into their yard. So this is a depiction of, so here's the church. Obviously, the two signs that are part of their approval today are these. The problem with these signs is they're illuminated, as Lee kind of indicated, this is an opaque glass, effectively. And their concerns is this glass or this lighting is actually protruding out, which my read of the lighting ordinance is that's against the ordinance. You got any lighting on top of roofs has to be inward facing on the facade. In addition, lighting can't be affecting public rights of way. As you come on Maple, this lighting is really prevalent. So when you're turning on Maple off of Elkhorn Drive or even just driving east on Maple, the lighting's an issue. And I could cite the lighting ordinance, but obviously Eric, you could probably say what it is too, but that's the concern. So the HOA, and here their letter in essence, it says, and I'll read it for you. It has taken away the country setting in our subdivision, changed the way our homeowners have been able to enjoy their land in both the early mornings and evenings with the bright light shining into the homes. The lights disturbing their family dinners, children's ability to sleep peacefully. And before, everyone was able to sit out on their deck and enjoy the stars, but now that's been compromised. As far as I know, the pastor and the church have been, since we kind of voiced this concern to them, they've been really good. I know they had a good conversation with the Hastings last night. Unfortunately, as we all know, this is the forum to kind of object to these things and make sure that this lighting issue is addressed. So, you know, that's where we are. I don't know what the recommendation from you all would be, but obviously our concern is we got to shut down the lights until at least some sort of agreement can be had with the neighbors to the west, because as it sits right now, it's our position that this sign and its illumination, does not comply with the code. And I don't know what sort of approvals they got initially, and Eric, maybe you know, but that's our position. So with that, obviously here to answer any questions.
Well, that's my question is how do they get the signs if it's not to code? Maybe you answer that question. Second question I have is, are those signs up already?
They are.
They're up already, and so that must be some pretty bright light. Do you have pictures of the signs at night or anything that we could look at?
Again, this all happened in probably the last 4 days. I think the church finally turned them on. We went to take photos last night, and I think that this wasn't malicious at all. I think the church was just being mindful of the neighbors. They turned the lights off, so we couldn't get photos to kind of show you all what it looks like. We have a really grainy photo on an iPhone, but it doesn't do it justice. So that's why I think we're at a peculiar place, and I know they have to go to ZBA tomorrow with y'all's approval. So we don't, mean to hold up the process, but the reality is we need some sort of agreement that these lights will either be turned off until we can come to agreement, or some other sort of remedy is put in place.
Well, I think that the issue here before us is not the luminescent panel. We're here to talk about the sign itself, and that's not part of the sign.
Well, and that's the only thing that and Eric, I'll defer to you too, but as I see this sign, it's these two signs on the building that were as part of their approvals. These signs are what are being illuminated today. So, we almost have to object to them, because if we don't, then we lose our ability to object to the fact they're also illuminated.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. The lighting ordinance is separate from what we're talking about, from my understanding. So, and for as far as, and this is probably a question for the church, is when those plans were approved by the city, was that lighting concept, that luminous panel, approved by the city for your permits? Okay. Was there luminescent design given to the city as a part of that?
Yeah, it's part of the architectural. Let's help.
Well, step up here.
Corey Nelson, 11656 Meredith Avenue, with Relevant Church. Yes, my understanding is that it was submitted with all the architectural drawings, that the lighting design was in all the drawings that were stamped for approval.
Okay, those drawings will have that in them, and they'll have a specification as far as what kind of lights they are.
Correct.
Then there's a submittal process after that's approved that they have to submit to show the actual, how many lumens are on every square foot of the property. And then the ordinance that you referred to refers to the horizontal projection of that. And so that's where my point is, that's nothing that we deal with. And the city in the permitting process has to deal with that.
But let me just ask this question of you, Brent. If what you're saying is the request is that those new signs that are already up are backlit, the only way to backlight them is to light the whole thing. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. I mean, that's what we see today, is we see.
And so you want us to say, don't backlight those lights until we figure this out, because that's.
At a minimum.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
right. I mean, at a minimum, I would say, can we hold off backlighting those until the two sides can just form some sort of mutual agreement at a minimum? And that's what, I mean, you guys, as a somewhat routine, approve things conditioned upon the parties formalizing some sort of agreement. No one wants to say you can't go put these two R's right here in their monument sign, but backlighting those signs, and I think we disagree on that, but backlighting them and not having some sort of conversation with the neighbors as to what their expectations for those lights, I mean, that's ultimately why we're here. I mean, and that's why I'm standing in front of you.
What's the distance between these houses, the house, not the land, but the houses to the sign?
It's a good question. I took a picture. So here's a photo from the Hastings yard. So this is looking, I mean, there's the Elkhorn water tower. This is looking east. So you can see, here's the sign, which is already up. And this portion up here is what's illuminated, and that shines straight out. I mean, it's pretty incredible lighting. I don't know how they get to do that, but I get it from an architectural standpoint, but it's certainly lighting up their house. So that's, I'd be speculating, unless Patrick, you know the exact distance. Introduce yourself.
Patrick Hastings, 21500 Elk Ranch Circle. I do have a picture from my kitchen window, but it's on my cell phone if you'd like to.
Put it underneath.
Is your house the one with the horseshoe driveway?
Yes, it is. Well, both us and Shields have horseshoe driveways, but we're the one closer to the property.
Just lay it right there, yeah.
That's from your house?
Correct. That's correct. And as I say, you know, I'm thankful that, you know, a church is going to be our neighbor. I guess what's upsetting is when we purchased this property about 3 years ago, I didn't think that was going to be my view. So, I mean, that's, like I said, we really had to come to some sort of agreement before the signs are approved. Because as you can see, it is kind of disturbing right now.
Do those stay on all night long, or do, I mean,
It's been on and
maybe it's
off.
just been a few days, I guess, if
It's
they've been.
about a week and a half. Some of the nights they've been on all throughout the night. I got my son at like 2 in the morning. Noticed that they were on. Last night they were not on at all. So there hasn't been really it's been kind of an
Still
yeah.
a work in progress,
Yes,
maybe?
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, let's get back to the hearing. Any other opponents? Okay, come on down, sir.
Tom Hastings, 9708 Valoretta Drive, Gretna. And I'm in big trouble for coming up here. Patrick's my son. You know, I know members of the church, and we don't have any problem at all with the church, obviously. But this was their dream home. They saved for it, and they looked for years. Well, there's 10 acres. Every night they see deer. You can see every star in the sky. That's why they bought this house. They looked for, I don't know how many. But Patty and I, they'd call up, can you meet us here? We want to show you this house. I'm sorry. I have a physical ailment. That's that my bladder's built too close to my eyeballs. Anyway. So we have nothing against but that little photo on his phone there, what that is there signs as big as that piece right there. But then it goes, this light, and it's all lit at the same time. It goes for I don't know how many hundreds of feet. He doesn't have to worry about stubbing his toe now when he gets up to check the kids. His house isn't like this, but it's lit. You can just walk through it because the whole back of the house is glass, you know. So I'm not an appraiser, but I do know what stuff like how this stuff, something like, I mean, the reason they bought it was for all that. This would devaluate their house by 50%. The first thing somebody's going to say is, whoa, I don't want to look at this every night.
Just show it during the day.
Pardon?
Just show the house during the day.
I know, but you know where I'm coming from. So, anyway,
Is the sign on the,
it's not a small deal.
is the sign facing northwest? I'm trying to understand. It's on the building, isn't it?
It would be actually, I think, facing.
Two sides.
So
there's a sign right
okay.
Somewhat
So sign at Elkhorn
southwest.
Drive as well as, okay, the northwest.
Kind of, Well, there's two of them. There's one that faces Maple, which would face north or northwest. The one that really affects them faces southwest. Southwest.
Is there that much traffic on Elkhorn Drive?
No. No, there's some ballparks on down at the one end. It's kind of just a tranquil, there's not much. It's kind of the back way into Elkhorn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So what do we?
I'd like to hear from the
decided?
city what our options maybe
Well,
are,
let's,
what we're looking
let's-
at here.
Let's
Thank you.
continue. Or do we have any other opponents? Come on down. If anybody else would like to speak, feel free to come on down. And I think there's one of you maybe left, so if you want to.
Michelle Cheadle, 3501 North 216th Street, Elkhorn. I am in the home that sits up on the top of the hill next to Patrick Hastings' home. I represent Elkhorn Ranch Homeowners Association. I am the Secretary Treasurer, and I've been bombarded this week with the other homeowners in our subdivision. We've had discussion here today about the proximity of the light to our homes. Our homes are the closest to it, and we have 10-acre homes. We have 10-acre homes across the street from us that also have this light shining into their homes. The ones that are on 216th Street, those homes right there on that side are being affected as well. We have a situation where I've heard today that they want to advertise their space. The relevant church, here we are. And I can appreciate that, and I understand that. But Elkhorn Drive does not have a traffic flow. If you are looking to advertise your space, the lighting should be on the back side of that building, which is towards the east of Maple Road, not the west, or where we're at on Elkhorn Drive. It does not provide any advertising whatsoever from that space where it's at. I do personally feel that this has been a situation where we as a community were not involved with the church. They did not reach out to us. They did not give us any communication or bring us into the fold whatsoever to talk about how this lighting would affect and what their signage would do to our properties and to the country setting. The church that is on 204th Street, the other churches in the community have all gone with lighting that is similar, if not exact, to the street lights, which is kind of the amber lighting, versus the very bright LED lighting that is so bold and in your face, that really is outside of anything that our community represents whatsoever. It is a very small lane that goes through Elkhorn Drive, is a very small country lane, which was tree covered on both sides. And I do remember when we were planning to have the church come in, part of their agreement is that it was going to remain a beautiful tree covered environment, and that no longer is. So we do have some real concerns about whether these lights on this building and this signage is part of their lighting. And I just wanted to voice my concerns, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Would you like to rebut, please?
Lee Hammond, 1601 Dodge Street, on behalf of the applicant. Excuse me. To the point about the so-called advertising, these are just identification signs, and there will be no additional signs. So Maple Street is right up here. This one sign is right on, I'd call it the north corner of the building. The other sign, the other R backlit sign, is on the front of the building that faces the street, and it's just strictly identification. The monument sign will be out here. It's a low profile. It's 16.25 square feet. So this is very minimal. And again, the glass panels on the facade are architectural glass. It's backlit. This is not projecting glass. Unfortunately, light beams travel in a straight line, and you know, it's been characterized as projecting. It's not. It's just a glow. I've also mentioned that these are controlled lights. We tone them down at night. What I believe these people are responding to, when the electrician finished up the wiring on that, it's my understanding they had to do a burn-in for the lights, and they turned them up to the max and let them run for so many hours and left them on. And they don't need to be operated like that, and they are not intended to be operated like that at all times. And these are not going to run all night. They'll go off, I don't know, Corey, you have
A couple hours after dusk.
a couple hours after dusk. I would imagine if there's an event there, they may leave it on while the event is still going. But beyond that, I mean, this is not intended or designed to light up the neighborhood. So as far as the scale of the property from the affected property owners, so I believe this is the Hastings property. This is out of the staff report. The church building is over here. If you look at the scale at the bottom, that's 1,100 feet from there to there. I mean, it's not like they're in the backyard. The final thing I'd say is we're in an R4 zone. We didn't change the zoning. The civic use for a church is a permitted use with a conditional use permit. And we've gotten that permit. So really, we're kind of getting distracted from two small backlit signs on two corners of the building and getting into architectural glass that really isn't part of the discussion. So with that,
Let me ask you a question about that. You say that they're two separate issues, but isn't it true that you can't backlight those signs without turning on the light on the architectural glass?
you can switch it off in segments.
So you can backlight those two R signs without lighting the entire strip?
That's the understanding.
That's-
We just took.
Well, that makes me a little uncomfortable if that's the understanding. It's kind of yes or no.
Corey, 11656 Meredith Avenue. So we just took occupancy of the building last week, and that's when they were turned on last week was before we occupied the building. So once we took occupancy of it, now the lights have been going off, I think around 8 o'clock at night. And then as we're figuring out the system, we just shut them off for now. And they're going to have, the electrician is going to have his distributor come and commission the lights and show us how to do all the programming. Because we don't know how to do the programming right now, but he is going to come. That's why the lights are off right now. But it is our understanding, I know the lights are dimmable. I believe that we can just backlight the R's. We can do sections, as Lee said.
Okay. I guess I'd,
Now, this drawing that you gave us, it's pretty hard to read because it's so small, but it looks as though those panels are noted as metal wall panels. Were they originally metal and then changed to luminous, or?
There may be metal on the front of the building, but those panels have always been architectural glass as far as I know.
I mean, okay. Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for these gentlemen? Okay, may we hear from the city, please?
Sure. So with the lighting issue aside, for large civic sites such as churches and schools, we are supportive of an increase in signage when it's in a residential zoning district. The residential code is a very small number, and when you have a 10-acre site for a large church and parking lot, we are usually supportive of those increases in the sign budget. And so we do have a recommendation report for approval for the increased signage that is before you. That would also have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I think it's on tomorrow, on tomorrow's meeting. I received correspondence from adjacent properties concerned about the lighting late last week, and so I did let our chief electrical inspector know, and he is in the process of looking at the plans that were approved, specific lighting codes for the city of Omaha. I don't specifically work with those, so I can't get into the numbers or the details. But our chief electrical inspector, him and his team do. So they are in the process of looking at that. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer on that today. But I guess I would view that as, a separate code matter. And if there is an issue, we would remedy that by contacting, the property owner in the manner that is usually set up for when there's, if it was constructed differently than what was approved under the electrical permit, an issue like that. Now, if it's permitted and, the lumens are okay, it's hard for me to speculate since I don't have all the information, but we have already started looking into that. We'll continue those efforts. But I think the planning department, we would keep our recommendation for approval of a major amendment to the conditional use permit to allow religious assembly in the R4 district, subject to the 7 conditions in the recommendation report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
So they're already in their building, but we're voting to allow them to be in their building?
The original use permit was approved in 2016. There was also a zoning board of appeals waiver for maximum impervious coverage, which is also one of the waivers that can be supported with a large civic use such as this. So the original approval was in May of 2016. This is a major amendment due to the signage increase.
Okay.
Now, I would also encourage, the applicant and any interested parties, if they can come to an agreement about hours of operation with the different lighting. Of course, the city, we will continue on our path in reviewing the approved plans or what has been constructed.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna recommend too, because I don't think it's your intention to disrupt the neighbors at all. And I think it'd be both your best interest if you parties could get together and communicate and talk and try and find a suitable solution, because I think there's one out there. I really do.
I would just comment that at this point, I'm not comfortable voting to allow you to move ahead, because I don't think that I got a clear answer on exactly how these lights work, and to the extent that it involves illuminating the entire facade, that would be a problem for me. So that's how I feel. I think until that is nailed down, I'm not comfortable allowing that, but those are my comments.
We need to clearly understand what we're voting on as well.
And I understand the difference between the code issues with the lighting of that strip, but to me, if you're not 100% sure that you can turn off the rest of it and only leave the R illuminated, that brings the two issues together for me.
I agree with Chris as well, in that I'd be comfortable laying it over and letting them get some more answers to it.
Rudolph had the same problem with Santa.
So, do we have a motion?
I motion for layover.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you call the vote, please?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion approved to layover.
Hopefully, when everything gets up and working, it'll all work itself out and you guys can all come to an agreement.
Thank you. I'm confident it will, because the electrician told me that it's all programmable and all controllable, so the lumens should not be a problem. We'll meet code.
Great.
Nicely.
Thank you. Okay, we have, the remaining item is the minutes. Did anybody receive the minutes? They were sent, but I don't think anybody received them.
I didn't get it.
So we have minutes from September and October. September, we had waited on a little bit due to a couple of changes. And so I think we will hold off on approving September and October's minutes until we have received those. But then we made some changes at the last meeting.
Yeah.
And held those off. So I think we'll hold off on those until the December meeting. So do I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion for adjournment in a second. Lisa, will you please call the vote?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved, adjourn at 4:36.
Thank you.